Chapter 2379. Old Sir Moo involuntarily heaved a long sigh. This is a long story. Please follow me, everyone. Since they were all talisman masters, the more people there were, the better. Old Sir Moo also hoped that these people would be able to discern something. Especially the two disciples from the Taiji sect, he hoped that they would be able to give a different opinion. The people who followed old Sir Moo into the backyard passed through the defensive array and arrived at the door of a row of rooms. Tong Zheng was standing guard outside the room. When he saw the people who came, he merely glanced at them indifferently. Old Sir Moo cupped his hands and said, "Please inform them." Tong Mo silently flashed into the room. However, he flashed out a moment later and said indifferently to old Sir Moo, "Everyone, come in." The room was extremely large. When they walked in, they saw a row of low cabinets carved with flowers. At the corner, there were several double-sided bamboo screens embroidered with green bamboo. Shen Fei focused his gaze and saw a large bed made of rosewood. Indistinctly, he could make out two figures, one sitting and one lying down. During this period of time, Mo Lian had been feeding the little fellow's spirit fluid every day and had the maids help her change her clothes regularly. Therefore, even though she had been lying down for 7 days with her eyes closed, she still looked clean, comfortable, and tidy. Her small face was rosy and glossy. She looked no different from a normal person who was sleeping. Only Mo Lian was extremely anxious. He was aware that the little fellow had been lying down for 7 days. During these 7 days, other than hearing her faint breathing and feeling her strong heartbeat, she didn't move, jump, or smile. To be frank, he couldn't even see her stoic face that he usually saw every day. Other than a peaceful sleeping expression on the little fellow's face, there was nothing else. He didn't know what had happened to her, what was wrong with her soul, and why he couldn't even contact the sapling. As the days passed, he grew increasingly flustered and fearful. No matter how he comforted himself, he couldn't convince himself that Jojo was fine. Lifting the curtain, Mo Lian walked out with a gloomy expression and nodded at old Sir Moo, who cupped his hands in greeting. "Greetings, Your Highness." Old Master Moo's words shocked the two Taoist priests and Shen Fei. They thought to themselves, so this magnificent and outstanding man standing in front of me is actually the crown prince who hasn't returned to the divine prefecture for a long time. Your Highness, these two are disciples of the Tai Chi sect. This young friend Shen is also a talisman master who was attracted by the ghost spirits outside. Let these three take a look at the crown princess's condition. What does Your Highness think? So the one lying inside was the crown princess, Shen Fei thought. After receiving the crown prince's approval, old Master Moo led the three of them behind the screen and looked at the young girl lying on the bed with a calm expression. The young girl was covered with a golden velvet quilt. Although her eyes were closed, her face still looked very delicate and beautiful. Shen Zhen could guarantee that she had never seen anyone more beautiful than the one in front of her, at least in the great divine land. Old Master Moo sighed and explained the crown princess's condition to the three of them. The two Tai Chi sect disciples first threw 2 awakening talismans and then used several different talismans. Then, they frowned and said, "How could this be? Could it be that the ghost spirits gathered outside because they took a fancy to the crown princess's body?" Chapter 2380. Shen Fei suddenly thought of this and could not help but ask in shock. Old Mr. Moo nodded with a grave expression. The two Taoist priests of the Tai Chi sect naturally had ugly expressions. Shen Fei sneered and said, "Since we have encountered such a situation, we naturally cannot stand by and do nothing. This one does not have any other abilities, but it is still possible to assist old Mr. in setting up a few defensive glyph arrays." She, Shen Fei, absolutely would not allow those ghosts to freely occupy other people's bodies. Old Mr. Moo nodded with gratification. Then I will have to trouble everyone to help. It's our duty. The few glyph masters discussed for a while and decided to go out later to reinforce the formation of the courtyard. As for Mo Lien, she called over a submissive maid. After instructing her in a deep voice, she left the maid by the little fellow's side to watch over it. She raised her hand to rub the space between her eyebrows and walked out with a heavy heart. The slightly cold wind blew against his face, causing his head to clear up a little. Now, he naturally had to keep a clear head at all times and think of countermeasures. This little fellow's body was completely fine, which meant that there was a problem with the soul. As for why the soul had left the body, Mo Lien naturally did not have any clue at this moment that the courtyard under the winter sun looked rather bleak and desolate. In the small garden, the flowers had long withered, leaving only a few withered leaves that swirled on the ground with the cold wind. Mo Lien walked under a faint ray of sunlight. Her thoughts had long drifted to an unknown place, but a few sharp voices sounded in her ears. There is still no movement today. A woman's scornful and sharp laughter sounded. That's right, he hasn't woken up for 7 days. I think there is an 80% chance that he is about to die. Another voice was slightly lower, but the tone was full of disdain. Prince Mo's footsteps paused, a violent rage suddenly surging in his heart. What nonsense were these women gossiping about? Who are they saying is about to die? He narrowed his cold eyes and looked through a few withered trees. He saw 3 gorgeously dressed young women sitting in a pavilion, drinking tea and lazing around. Mo Lien naturally recognized the 3 of them. Fong Su had sent 4 maids to serve Jojo, along with the maid who was left to serve Jojo. In the past few days, they had been very respectful in front of him, not even daring to look at him. But he didn't expect them to be so unruly behind his back, daring to curse his master. The Crown Prince is really pitiful. Accompanying a living dead person day and night is truly torturous. I think so too. We could have set off for Dragon Flame City a long time ago, but because of that living dead, our journey was delayed for so long. I don't know what's so good about that woman. I heard that she's just an ordinary village girl from a planet called Sikong in the lower star field. In Dragon Flame City, any daughter of an aristocratic family would be much better than her. That's right. I don't know what His Highness is thinking, insisting on bringing a living dead person from the lower star field back to our divine prefecture. It's so annoying to take care of that half-dead woman every day. Fortunately, I can come out to get some fresh air, or else it will be even more uncomfortable. They were brought here from the palace by Fong Su, specially waiting for His Highness in South City and waiting for him to return to the palace. Now, the 4 of them, who had high status in the palace, were asked to serve that half-dead and submissive village girl. Dissatisfaction and resentment accumulated in their hearts day by day. Chapter 2381. In addition, His Highness, who was as handsome as a god, didn't even look at them. Every day, he just stayed by the living dead side, watching over her day and night. How could they not be angry? That kind of person from the lower star area might only be at the low level of the profound realm. I really don't know how she has the face to stay by His Highness' side. Exactly. Oh, it's so annoying. If she always looks half dead, I don't know how long we'll have to wait on her. What can we do? Who asked us to be in such a bad situation? I'm really not reconciled. I think she's 99% rich and poor. She'll be fine with just a few injections. Pfft, one of them laughed. 2 injections. Do you dare? His Highness has been watching over that living dead almost all the time. Even when we bathed and changed the living dead, he looked at us through the screen, as if we would abuse her. If you dared to secretly give her injections, would you still be standing here and laughing with us? The person who said the injections also found it funny. She giggled a few times. Do you think I dare? His Highness, could it be that he could look at her 24 hours a day without blinking? He has to eat and wash his hands. Humph. Don't say that. Maybe she'll suddenly wake up after I give her 2 injections. If that's the case, I'll be a hero. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. Wow, then when you become a hero, remember to help us. I really don't know why His Highness is so patient. A palace maid said enviously, other than her pretty face, what else can that girl have that can compare to the noble ladies of Dragonflame City? She's already a living dead, but she's still so seductive. The palace maid curled her lips. Even if she's a fairy, His Highness will get tired of her one day. In their opinion, the crown prince of the divine land was incomparably noble. How could he stay by a half-dead person's side? Sigh, so annoying. If that woman had died early, perhaps we would have been able to return to the palace sooner. The palace maid who had spoken stomped her feet and twisted her body as she turned around, her voice suddenly lowering. Separated by the withered branches, she widened her eyes in horror. She was as silent as a cicada in winter as she looked at the crown prince, whose expression was cold and whose gaze was so deep that one could not see the end of it. She did not know how long the crown prince had been standing behind them. The palace maid felt a buzzing sound in her head. She was scared out of her wits and was on the verge of collapsing. Her 2 companions beside her tugged at her sleeves in surprise. What's wrong with you? She followed her and turned around. Her mouth gaped open and her eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Mo Lien's eyes were filled with coldness as she asked word by word, "Who did you say is a living dead?" Bang! The bedroom door was kicked open by someone. The palace maid in the room was originally sitting by the bed and dozing off out of boredom. From time to time, she glanced at the girl lying motionless on the bed and rolled her eyes impatiently. The sound of the door being kicked was so loud that it scared her out of her wits and made her jump up from the bed. The crown prince appeared at the door with a vicious aura. The palace maid opened her mouth wide and hurriedly bowed. Your Highness. Chapter 2382. Like a whirlwind, Mo Lien dashed forward and sent that royal maid sprawled on the ground flying with a kick. He hurriedly reached out to pick up the little fellow and pulled open her collar to check her neck, shoulders, and legs. Then, he lifted up her sleeves. When his line of sight landed on her jade-like arm and saw the 2 finger marks on it, his entire handsome face turned green with anger. It was obvious that these palace maids did not take good care of his Jojo. The humble and cautious performance in front of him was all an act. Behind his back, how did they choke his Jojo to this extent? This was because he almost never left Jojo's side, so there was no chance for them to do anything. That was why there were only 2 bruises left. If they were allowed to take care of his Jojo as usual, who knows how the little girl would be tortured by these wretches. Mo Lien's heart was filled with a violent rage, almost unable to control himself and wanted to go berserk. What damned calmness, elegance, all get lost. These 7 days, he had been feeling suffocated every day, and now he found out about this matter. He could not control his anger, could not control his desire to kill, to destroy the world, to make them all die without a burial place. The 4 palace maids trembled as they knelt on the ground, unable to stop their bodies from trembling, as if they were sifting chaff, and repeatedly kowtowed to beg for mercy. When Fong Su hurriedly walked into the courtyard with Eunuch Hu, he saw the 4 palace maids pressed down on the long bench. Their bodies were already badly mutilated, and their breaths were also on the verge of death. Your Highness. Fong Su and the others hurriedly kneeled on one knee and cupped their hands in salute. Their eyes were filled with surprise as they looked at the black figure standing on the steps. They saw him looking coldly ahead, his phoenix eyes filled with endless anger. His entire person was emitting an icy cold air, incomparably awe-inspiring. Fong Su's heart could not help but thump slightly. Here you talk about the living dead, right? You talk about the living dead. Today, this prince will make all of you living dead. The crown prince's tone was not high, but the coldness in his voice had already made everyone present feel a chill down their spines. Your Highness, please calm down. In the entire courtyard, from top to bottom, there was not a single servant who was not afraid. The steward sat paralyzed on the side, looking like he was about to faint. Since this prince temporarily moved into this residence, he was basically like a little transparent. He did not speak much, and did not make any requests of the princess. Although she had a cold look on her face every day, she seemed to have a very kind temper. Today, the steward knew what it meant when the crown prince was angry, and what it meant when he said that just a cold glare could suppress your heart to breathe. Although the 4 palace maids, they were to be in the courtyard, as a steward, naturally, he did not have to take care of these servants. Eunuch who could not hide the astonishment in his eyes. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward, lowered his head, and said softly, Your Highness, please calm down. I do not know how these 4 palace maids. Prince Mo turned his head, and his cold gaze fell on the old eunuch. He naturally knew about the capable eunuch by his imperial father's side, but now, he had no interest in giving him a good look. Eunuch whose heart slightly tightened, and he subconsciously lowered his head, thinking to himself, this crown prince's eyes are abnormally cold. Chapter 2383. When he looked at you coldly, the psychological pressure he gave you was not at all inferior to His Majesty's. Eunuch Hoot said even more respectfully, I wonder why your highness is angry. This old servant will. No need. Mo Lien looked at him coldly. Throw them far away. We have no interest in seeing them again. Tong led a few black-clothed youths and silently appeared behind the crown prince. He flew forward, picked up the 4 badly mutilated palace maids, and jumped over the wall to leave. Eunuch who? His willful grandfather, what was he trying to do? The crown prince's cold gaze flitted across Eunuch whose face. Then, he flicked his sleeves and left without a word. He left behind a group of people kneeling or paralyzed on the ground. They looked at each other, but no one dared to stand up on their own initiative. Mo Lien clenched his fists and quickly walked into the room. He closed the door behind him. His phoenix eyes, which were filled with coldness and killing intent, softened little by little when he saw the little girl lying quietly on the bed. He ran forward quickly. Mo Lien pulled back his arms and hugged the little fellow tightly in his arms. He hugged her tightly, hugged her tightly, hugged her tightly. He was such a proud baby. Now, he was unknowingly being despised, loathed, and tormented by a few lowly wretches. His heart ached. His heart ached so much that he wanted to die. It was all his fault. He was not attentive enough. He did not work hard enough. He did not give enough. He was not good enough. That was why she suddenly disappeared. He was getting more and more panicked and fearful. Especially when he closed his eyes, he would strangely think of her staring blankly into the distance and saying to him, I once had a very distant dream. In the dream. No way. No way. Impossible. 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 That was just a dream. She wouldn't go back. She wouldn't go back to that dream. She would not abandon him and go back to the dream. Absolutely not. He held her hands tightly and rested his head on her shoulders. He did not realize that he was trembling slightly. He hugged her as if he was hugging her at this moment, and it was as if he would hug her forever. His eyes were broken and blurred. Where are you? Where did you go? The furry little white mink jumped lightly and landed on someone's chest. It turned its head and looked at the silent wind with a slightly confused expression. The stone slope was surrounded by odd-shaped stones. But there wasn't even a third-grade spirit beast here. Let alone a seventh-grade spirit beast. Except for this small marten. Duanyu, this guy, simply found a spot to slump down on the rock slope to drink and sleep, leaving her to wander around this place. At this moment, the sky was about to darken, and it seemed that he had no intention of leaving at all. Little marten looked up at the sky and used its little paw to step on someone's chest. However, a certain someone pressed down on her round little body with one hand. Stop fooling around, sleep some more. Duanyu reached out to block the glaring afterglow of the setting sun. The little white mink squirmed out from under his arm and scratched his arm with its paw. Duanyu withdrew his arm and opened his eyes. Under the rays of the setting sun, his pair of outstanding peach blossom eyes seemed to contain an inextinguishable starlight that floated and sank in the depths of his eyes. If you scratch again, I'll chop off your little paw. He threatened and raised his fist. Chapter 2384. The little fellow used her two hind hooves to stomp on him before jumping up, wanting to leave. Duanyu hugged her and pressed down on her round body. He stood up with a smile and said, "You really have quite a temper. All right, let's go home. Let me touch you to see if you've digested the food." Miss Chow suddenly bristled and slapped away his fingers that were reaching for her stomach. Why aren't you letting me touch you? Speaking of which, you always like to stick to my mom. Could it be you're a male? Duanyu's brain circuits suddenly thought of this, and he looked down at the little fellow before flipping her body over. Let me see. See your ass. Miss Chow was so angry that she was about to ascend to the heavens, and she shrieked at him. Duanyu couldn't resist chuckling. Still embarrassed. Fine, then I won't look. Stop scratching. If you scratch again, I'll really beat you. You little thing, why do you have such a big temper? But speaking of which, this is my first time seeing such an adorable little ferret like you. Duanyu's voice faintly drifted into the wind. Miss Chow listened to him absent-mindedly as she leaned on his arm, her expression a bit tired. Although Duanyu came to the stone slope with the large group, he took arbor to hide and relax after arriving at their destination. If he still didn't come back now, people would be alarmed to look for him. The angriest person was Commandery Princess Xiangchang. She originally thought that she could hunt a level 7 spirit beast with His Highness the 4th Prince at the stone slope while bonding with him. Who would have thought that His Highness the 4th Prince would disappear without a trace after coming here? Now that she saw Duanyu's figure, Commandery Princess Xiangchang was so aggrieved that her eyes were about to turn red. She hastily ran up and cried pitifully, "Brother Ali, where did you go by yourself? The 2nd Prince and the 3rd Prince hunted that level 7 spirit beast, but that fellow is still very wild and needs to be tamed for a while before it can be contracted. Do you want to go take a look?" Duanyu naturally couldn't be bothered to pay attention to this Commandery Princess who was talking to herself. He simply walked around her and walked forward. After the group returned to the camp, the Emperor was in high spirits because he hunted a level 7 spirit beast today, so he ordered people to hold a banquet. With the great Emperor's order, the people below busied themselves with preparations. Fortunately, the ingredients were already made. Soon, shelves and short tables were set up in front of the campsite. The bonfire was lit, and the musicians and dancers for the banquet were all in place. Soon, Miss Chow was carried to the banquet venue by Duanyu. She lay there drowsily, looking a bit listless. Duanyu teased her with food as if no one else was present. He completely ignored Xiangchang Commandery Princess, who was sitting at the table next to him and gazing at him with burning eyes. As the great Emperor, the Empress, and the concubines entered, the atmosphere became more and more intense. The sound of the officials toasting and congratulating each other was intertwined with the sound of laughter and toasting. Tonight was a starry night, and the moonlight was soft. Xiao Mu rolled her small body and lay on the short table, looking up at the sky. "Little cutie, why are you looking at the sky today? It must be because you didn't take good care of him. He thinks you're bored." Noble Consort Duan walked over and reached out to pick up Miss Chiao, who was lying on the table. Her fingers scratched Miss Chiao's chin. "Duan, you. Mother, you're here to steal my little dumpling again." Noble Consort Duan waved her hand and turned a deaf ear to her son's complaints. She carried the little girl back to her seat. Chapter 2385. "Mom, don't feed her until she's full again." Duan Yu exasperatedly called out as he watched his mother carry the little thing away. Really, his mother, why did she always have to snatch the little fellow from him? The elderly nanny next to Noble Consort Duan covered her mouth and snickered. "Your Highness, did you see His Highness's gaze just now? So resentful." Noble Consort Duan also nodded with a smile. I saw it. This child, it's not like Mom stole his wife. So petty." Noble Consort Duan grumbled as she carried the little mink back to her seat. She happily fed the little fellow food. "Your Highness, this is the blue and white wine bestowed by His Majesty." A maidservant walked up to Noble Consort Duan with a smile and bowed slightly before pouring a cup of wine for Noble Consort Duan. As the wine flowed, Noble Consort Duan sniffed slightly and said joyfully, this wine's fragrance is truly intoxicating. I know it's good wine even before tasting it." "That's right. This is the tribute wine sent by the Kingdom of Qingzhou. There are only a dozen jars every year, so not everyone can drink it," that maidservant explained with a chuckle. The instant the wine was poured, Miss Chiao's small nose also twitched. At this time, Noble Consort Duan grinned as she flicked her sleeve and reached out to pick up the wine cup, about to put it into her mouth. Without another word, the little fellow pounced forward and kicked the cup of wine out of Noble Consort Duan's hand in one smooth motion. Clang! The cup shattered on the ground, but the sound wasn't enough to attract everyone's attention. However, everyone was originally looking at Noble Consort Duan, who was being bestowed wine by His Majesty, but when they saw this scene, they were instantly petrified on the spot. Noble Consort Duan's empty hand also stiffened. That hand was still holding the cup, but the cup shattered on the ground. Pfft! An undisguised malicious laughter wantonly rose in the venue. Halfway through their laughter, a tall and voluptuous woman hurriedly stood up and bowed to the Emperor and Empress with a smile on her face. "My apologies, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty." This concubine was rude, but it was truly too funny just now. Noble Consort Duan's mink is really interesting. Noble Consort Duan stood up with an indifferent expression and also bowed to the Emperor-Empress who was seated at the head of the table. This concubine's ferret is still young and doesn't know etiquette. I will teach it well in the future. Everyone's expression twisted. On the other hand, the imperial concubine who had jumped up to ridicule Noble Consort Duan was frozen on the spot with a stiff expression. She was so angry that the veins on her forehead were twitching. What did Noble Consort Duan mean by this? She had just said that she was lacking in manners, and now Noble Consort Duan was saying that her little Martin was also lacking in manners. Wasn't this implying that she was the same as that little bastard, unable to see the bigger picture? The Empress said faintly, "Noble Consort Duan, it's not that Ijia wants to criticize you. There are only 12 jars of blue and white wine offered by the Qingzhou kingdom. One of them was knocked over by your mink. What a disappointment. Your Majesty is right." That gorgeous woman from before couldn't resist interjecting, noble consort Duan's mink knocked over the tribute wine His Majesty bestowed, so she naturally can only use her life as compensation. The Empress remained silent. Just as the Emperor of Zhangzhou was about to speak with a frown, he heard Duan Yu coldly say, "You're all blind, right? Look at what that is." Following the direction he pointed in, everyone turned to look in that direction. Chapter 2386. The Zhangzhou campsite was originally built on a piece of land in the heavenly ice snow region. They had come here to hunt many times, so they naturally knew where to set up camp and where to hunt for more prey. At this time, everyone was looking in the direction Duan Yu was pointing. They saw that the toppled wine stained the ground and the soil had been completely charred black. This caused the celestial Empress and Empress's expressions to change drastically. The enchanting beauty who spoke earlier also immediately shut up, not knowing what to say. It turned out that this was a ferret that could distinguish poison. The reason why the ferret wanted to topple the wine cup in noble consort Duan's hand was because the ferret knew there was poison in the cup. Duan Yu's eyes flashed, and he stood up indifferently. He walked up to support his mother, who had a slightly unsightly expression, and bent down to pick up the little white ferret that was squatting on the side. His fingers gently stroked the little white ferret's head as he looked at everyone with a sneer. Under the bonfire, the man with outstanding features had an icy expression as he stood there like an ice sculpture. Although he was good-looking, he was brimming with a cold, baleful aura. You probably don't know. This prince's ferret can not only distinguish poison, but it can also ferret out the person who poisoned it. As Duan Yu stroked this little white ferret, his eerie gaze shifted slightly, sweeping past everyone's expressions. Everyone was taken aback by his words. Then, they began to look at each other, their eyes filled with doubt. Miss Chow couldn't resist secretly rolling her eyes when she heard this. She thought to herself, this guy is really confident. If she was a normal ferret, would she freaking cooperate with his actions? Go, little furball. Ferret out the person who poisoned you. Miss Chow had just finished rolling her eyes when she felt her petite body lighten slightly. She had been tossed out by that unruly dunce. She angrily howled and pounced on the face of the plump beauty who had mocked noble consort Duan earlier. Her small claws scratched her face twice without hesitation, startling that beauty into shrieking repeatedly. She reached out to grab the little white ferret's chubby body. The little fellow swiftly jumped onto her shoulder and pounced behind her neck, scratching it again. That beauty shrieked in pain as she flipped over the table in a sorry state and landed heavily on the ground. Nonsense. What nonsense? The Empress slapped the armrest heavily and scolded angrily, "Stop it now." Duan Yu leisurely strolled to the front of the well-rounded beauty. He first carried the little fellow on her back into his arms and smoothed its fur. Afterwards, he coldly glanced at her and pointed at the dumbstruck Zhangzhou guards beside them. What are you spacing out for? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and restrain the perpetrator. Ah! That plump beauty screamed and covered her face, crying as she knelt on the ground. She crawled forward on her knees and kowtowed to the celestial emperor and empress for help. Save me, your majesty, empress. Is Prince Qin out of his mind? Beauty Wang, why don't you take a look at what dropped by your feet? Duan Yu reminded coldly. The plump beauty looked down and her body stiffened. Impossible. How could she have the medicine on her? Didn't she throw it away already? She abruptly raised her head and looked towards the high ground. Sitting there was a dignified and decent Zhangzhou empress. Under the night sky, her eyes were both bright and dark. Royal father, how should Beauty Wang be punished for poisoning noble consort Duan? Duan Yu looked indifferently at the Zhangzhou emperor, who was sitting upright and still. Chapter 2387. Guards. The Emperor of Zhangzhou waved his hand and ordered, pass on Jin's decree. Beauty Wang is innately jealous and immoral. Improper words and deeds, a breach of etiquette in front of the Emperor. She was audacious enough to use underhanded means to harm noble consort Duan and stole her title of beauty. She will be severely punished with 50 strokes of the cane. She will be demoted to a commoner and expelled from the palace. Beauty Wang instantly collapsed to the ground. Even as she was being dragged and flogged, she was still shrieking incessantly, "Your Majesty, this concubine is innocent. Your Majesty, this concubine is truly innocent." It was a good banquet, but in the end, it ended on a sour note. After the Celestial Empress left the scene, everyone also dispersed. Duan Yu used the excuse that his mother needed to rest properly and didn't allow the little ferret to disturb her. Hence, he carried the protesting Miss Chiao into his tent. Fourth brother. A chuckle came from behind. Duan Yu turned around and saw the second and third princes walking over while holding hands. They were looking at him with fake smiles. Is there something else, elder brothers? Duan Yu asked aloofly. It's getting late, and you've been tired the entire day. Elder brothers should return early to rest. No hurry. The second prince's face twitched as he scanned his younger brother from head to toe. His gaze landed on the little white ferret in his arms. Fourth brother's ferret really stole the limelight today. Oh, it's merely some insignificant tricks. Duan Yu raised his hand to stroke the little fellow's head. He could feel that little thing awkwardly shaking its head, refusing to let him stroke it. Ha! The third prince pursed his lips and said with a chuckle, after the commotion tonight, we didn't have time to open everyone's eyes and see the level 7 spirit beast we captured. Oh. Duan Yu looked disinterested and added, sacred beasts can be seen frequently, but I really don't have much interest in seeing level 7 spirit beasts. When the little fellow heard this, it couldn't resist rolling around on his arm. It felt that this guy was truly vicious. His mouth was simply comparable to Lian's. Even though the second and third princes were so angry that they looked like pufferfish, they still had to maintain a graceful smile on their faces. Even Jojo felt sorry for them. Moreover, I've heard that the person who contributed the most to the capture of the 7th grade spirit beast was still Prince Rong. Duan Yu threw another fatal flying dagger and said with a chuckle, presumably, if vassal Prince Rong hadn't appeared in time, my 2 elder brothers might have been in danger. This time, the third prince could no longer maintain his good grace. He pointed at Duan Yu and shouted furiously, "You! What do you mean? You! Are you saying that without Rong Qing, we brothers wouldn't have been able to defeat that 7th grade spirit beast?" Duan Yu shrugged with a, of course, expression, which angered the gloomy second prince so much that he was also rendered speechless. Duan Yu looked up and waved at the other side with a chuckle. Rong. A tall man with outstanding features walked over from behind the 2 princes. He cupped his hands and bowed slightly. Greetings to your Second Highness, Third Highness, and His Highness Prince Qin. The second prince flicked his sleeve gloomily and said, let's go. The third prince naturally followed behind the second prince. He turned back to glare fiercely at Duan Yu before leaving in a huff. The third prince originally wanted to show off and taunt Duan Yu while he was at it, but he didn't expect to be humiliated by Duan Yu. It angered him so much that he returned to his tent with a swollen belly. Chapter 2388. Rong Qing curiously looked at the little ferret in Duan Yu's arms. Can this ferret really smell and identify poisons? Duan Yu nodded. Of course. Rong Qing then raised her hand to pat the little ferret's head. I can touch it. Ow! The little fellow turned around and roared at him. Touch my ass, do you think this lady is a kitten? Rong Qing's expression turned a bit sluggish. This was a ferret. Are you sure it wasn't a wolf cub? Duan Yu snickered and forcefully rubbed the little fellow's head. Miss Chiao was so angry that she scratched the back of his hand with her claws. Hiss. Duan Yu retracted his hand and looked at the 2 extra marks on the back of his hand. He huffed, "You're really ruthless, always scratching me. I'll chop off your claws one day. Vassal Air Rome will be returning first." Duan Yu waved at him and turned to walk back to his tent with the little fellow in his arms. Rong Qing stood there and watched Duan Yu's departing figure, curiosity involuntarily growing in her eyes. This His Highness the 4th Prince that the Emperor brought back from the lower star domain seemed to be a very demonic person. There must be another master behind Beauty Wang, but she probably didn't expect that she would lose her life in today's confrontation. Demoted to a commoner. Rong Qing curled her lips. She would lose half her life after being flogged 50 times. How could she survive being thrown out of the palace penniless like this? After returning to the large tent, Duan Yu placed the little ferret on a soft cushion and prepared to bathe before coming back to sleep. Thankfully, his bathing room was set up in the large tent next door, which prevented the tent he was staying in from steaming with water vapor. This also made Miss Chiao feel less awkward. This place was incomparably cold, so the water vapor inside the tent couldn't evaporate. Sleeping in the middle of the night would definitely freeze someone into a popsicle. When Duan Yu returned to the tent, the sky outside had already turned completely dark. At a glance, he saw a certain small animal sprawled on his bed. It looked like it was already asleep. His eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but find it amusing. Duan Yu walked up and picked up the little fellow. He stuffed her into the blankets and stroked her little head. Now that she was asleep, she naturally lay there obediently, allowing him to stroke her head. If she was awake, she would probably scratch him again. When Miss Chiao woke up, she saw that the light in the tent was still on. That idiot was sitting on the cushion with his back facing her. It seemed like he was going to meditate for the night. The little fellow quietly moved his small body. Just as he was about to crawl over, he saw his body move slightly. She quickly lay down and continued to pretend to be asleep. After Duan Yu finished regulating his breathing for 12 cycles, he felt that his spirit was fine, so he stood up and walked to the table to pour himself a cup of water to drink. Miss Chiao guessed that he was probably going to sleep, so she lay there motionless. However, that idiot didn't say anything for a long time. The little guy couldn't help but secretly open his eyes, and from the corner of his eyes, he glanced at the man sitting at the table. What is that guy doing? Cursing silently, Miss Chiao got up stealthily, jumped down from the soft brocade, and crawled a few paces over to his feet. However, she saw that he was supporting his forehead with one hand, and his eyes were in a daze. It turned out that he was sitting here in a daze in the middle of the night. Miss Chiao couldn't help but find it funny. Her pair of small black eyes glanced over, and then she couldn't help but be stunned. She saw a painting spread out on the table. Beside the clear water, there was a gentle mist, the vast sky, and the color of the water reached the sky. Chapter 2389. In the painting, a little girl with a stoic face was standing under a peach blossom tree, her eyes coldly gazing ahead. The little fellow turned to look at the man in bewilderment. Wasn't this Sir Jojo? Duan Yu, this guy, wasn't sleeping in the middle of the night and was sitting here looking at Sir Jojo's painting? What a dunce. Duan Yu had long discovered that this little fellow had sneaked to his side. He lifted her up and casually kicked her a few times before placing her on the table. Jojo curiously reached out her paw and lightly touched that painting. Duan Yu swatted away her paw and picked up the painting to look at it for a while before telling her, "This little girl is really fierce." What? Sir Jojo's ears perked up as he solemnly squatted on the table and stared at Duan Yu, that dunce. This guy actually dared to speak ill of Jojo behind his back. Let's hear what else he has to say. Don't be fooled by her stoic face and expressionless appearance. When she gets angry, she can make the sky fall and the earth crack. Arbor, this definitely wasn't Jojo. How could Jojo be like this? She was a good girl and very gentle. She never flipped out easily. Although she's fierce, she really is adorable and adorable. Duanyu lamented, don't be fooled by her usually stoic face. In reality, 99% of it is an act. You're the one who's acting. There's an abundance of emotions beneath that stoic face of hers. Sir Jojo spat at him. You're simply spouting nonsense. I don't want to listen to your nonsense anymore. I still remember the first time we met. She treated me like I was the enemy who killed her father and abused me. Duanyu was completely immersed in his own world and spoke through gritted teeth. She forced my head to drink that filthy water. She even tied me up like a dumpling and hit my head with a piece of wood every day. The little ferret was expressionless. You asked for it. At that time, I was thinking, how could there be such a fierce girl in this world? She was so fierce that I didn't want to have any interactions with her in the future. But I didn't expect. But now, I wish I could see her every day. I miss her and think about her. When I close my eyes, she walks around in my dreams. I wanted to grab her, but I didn't dare to. My heart was in a mess. Sigh. I don't know what you're trying to say. Young man, this is the sign of a demonic barrier. Little Martin looked at him with a heavy expression. Its pair of little black beady eyes were filled with solemn and serious emotions. What do you think I should do? Duanyu reached out to pick up this little mink and said while gazing at her, I probably fell in love with her. Otherwise, why do you think I think of her all the time and think of her all the time? Miss Jo felt her brain heat up, and her whole person, oh no, her whole ferret, stared at him rather stupidly. Was she being confessed to as a mink? Oh wait, how could Duanyu possibly know that she was hiding inside this ferret's body? Don't panic, he doesn't know. However, why did he feel inexplicably flustered? If he said that to her, she wouldn't know how to face this dunce in the future. What should she do? Why did she suddenly feel a bit awkward? The little fellow shrunk her small body and retreated a few steps. However, her body was suddenly picked up by him. A pair of black beady eyes stared straight at his almost sparkling peach blossom eyes. Chapter 2390. She inexplicably wanted to cover her eyes with her tiny paws. Her ears twitched, and she suddenly heard the dimwit's faint sigh. Jojo, is that you? Sir Jojo's entire body, oh, no, her entire mink body stiffened. She felt like she was most likely going to be exposed while squatting in his hands, so she kept scheming in her mind. She couldn't admit it, ow ow ow. She couldn't admit it. How could Sir Jojo be forced to stay inside a little mink's body so miserably? That was impossible. Sir Jojo, who was willing to suffer because of his pride, expressionlessly looked at Duanyu. As long as Sir Jojo didn't admit it, no one would know what happened when Sir Jojo was tricked by the soul detachment talisman. Sir Jojo wouldn't tell anyone about such a deplorable and ugly thing. Ow ow ow. Pfft, Duanyu couldn't resist chuckling. He rubbed Jojo's head and said, your serious expression is so funny. I'm just teasing you. You're so ugly, so how could you be my Jojo? Duanyu said with a grin, my Jojo is fair, tender, and beautiful. You're the prettiest little stoic in the world. Bah! You're the ugly one. Miss Chiao turned her head and faced him with the back of her head. She felt a little irritated and wanted to jump out of his embrace. All right, rest. He pressed down on her chubby body and put the painting scroll into his inner world before carrying her to the bed. Miss Chow suddenly felt irritated, especially after hearing his confession just now. She just wanted to run away like an ostrich and didn't feel sleepy at all. Little furball, sleep. SSSS, Duan Yu withdrew his hand and looked at her with flickering eyes. Why are you scratching me again? The little white mink jumped away and climbed onto the soft mattress next to the bed, looking like she was going to sleep here tonight. Duan Yu sat by the bed and looked at her like this. His eyes were so deep that she couldn't discern his true emotions. Miss Chow's heart skipped a beat, and she felt like she had nowhere to hide. Could it be that Duan Yu really recognized her? This was impossible. Her performance was so perfect that no matter what, it would be difficult for him to associate this mink with Sir Jojo, right? She once again lowered her head to size herself up. Her perfect disguise had no flaws at all. Duan Yu couldn't possibly recognize her. Duan Yu suddenly stood up and walked towards her step by step. Arbor saw his strange expression and had an inexplicable feeling of wanting to flee. She felt that if she continued to stay here, things would go out of control. She didn't want to hurt Duan Yu, this dunce, at all. Her body felt light as he picked her up with both hands. In the next second, he placed her under the warm blanket. Go to sleep. He threw down these words and walked out of the tent without looking back. The cold wind was howling outside. Where was he going in the middle of the night? Arbor couldn't help but roar in his heart. A pair of small black eyes stared at his figure disappearing at the entrance of the tent. Her heart was filled with displeasure. How could this loathsome guy be so willful? She sprawled on the bed and tossed and turned, wondering if she had exposed herself in front of him. Did he recognize her? How should she face this dunce in the future? His words made her feel very conflicted. Couldn't they just be good? Like in the past. Chapter 2391. She thought she would be so frustrated and upset that she wouldn't be able to sleep, but who knew that it didn't take long for her to fall asleep, and she slept very soundly. As expected, she was a big-hearted child. Lying there, her round little body didn't move at all. Her soul naturally strolled out and continued to hover above the bed, starting the cycle of cultivation. What Arbor didn't know was, at this time, a figure was silently standing outside the window, staring at her soul that was gradually becoming clearer. His fists clenched and relaxed and tightened again. In the end, Duan Yu still managed to restrain his impulse to charge inside. Not to speculate, not to probe, but to witness with his own eyes. His Jojo was really by his side at this very moment. It was her, it really was her. It was her. Duan Yu felt like he almost couldn't control his frantic heartbeat, nor could he suppress the longing that had been hidden in his heart. What to do? What should he do? Should I use this chance to make you stay an entire day and night? Inside the residence's small courtyard, Fong Su, Eunuch Hu, and the servants were all frantic with anxiety, unable to conceal the anxiety in their eyes. His Highness the Crown Prince had locked himself and the Crown Princess inside that room, but there had been no commotion the entire time. Fong Su and the others were naturally extremely anxious. Until Elder Mu hurried over and told them that the defensive talisman matrix outside was about to collapse and that more and more ghost spirits were gathering outside the residence. Fong Su finally couldn't resist jumping up and quickly walked to the door of the wing room. He hastily lifted his robe and knelt down, saying gravely, "This general, Fong Su, requests an audience with His Highness the Crown Prince for an urgent matter." This general, Fong Su. Shenfei jumped into the courtyard with a whoosh and looked at the servants kneeling all over the floor. He anxiously said, "Why are you all still here? Everyone enter the room." At this time, Shenfei's shoulder was also injured, and he was exhausted from head to toe after several consecutive battles. The defensive talisman matrix outside was about to collapse from so many ghost spirits, and those things would soon charge into the residence. The steward trembled as he crawled to the door of the wing room and cried, "Your Highness the Crown Prince. Why don't you leave with Commander Fong first? If something were to happen to His Highness, not only would his old bones be ground to dust, the entire South City would probably be buried with His Highness. Your Highness. Your Highness. Get out of the way." Shen Fei angrily roared at Fong Su, Eunuch Hu, and the steward who were kneeling at the door. He rushed forward and kicked the door of the room with all his might. Everyone was dumbstruck as they watched the two pieces of door fall to the ground with a loud crash. Shen Fei rushed into the room and pushed aside the obstructing screen in front of her. She looked straight at the man who was sitting by the bed and hugging the crown princess motionlessly with his head bowed. She didn't know how long the man had been frozen in this position. "Your Highness." They were about to charge in from outside. "Aren't you leaving yet?" At this moment, chaotic shouts could be heard coming from the courtyard. The flying rune papers quickly enveloped the servants in the courtyard and formed a defense rune array. The target of those ghost spirits who were rushing in wasn't the servants, so they naturally couldn't be bothered to attack the rune array. "Protect eldest miss." The moment Zhou Huan and the others rushed in, they quickly stood at the door of the wing room and started fighting with the ghost spirits who were flying over. But there were at least 2,000 ghost spirits gathered here. Chapter 2392. Zhou Huan's group of 8 could fend off 35 ghosts, or even 100 or 200 ghosts. How could they fend off 2,000 ghosts? The talisman paper around them had already been used up. Everyone picked up their swords and fought against the ghost spirits. Mo Lian's arm, which was hugging Arbor, slightly tightened. Finally, she reacted and slowly turned her head to the side. What entered everyone's eyes was a pair of pitch-black phoenix-like eyes. They were deep and cold as they stared at the group of ghost spirits that were swarming in with a shout. Shen Fei didn't know what kind of scene was imprinted in this crown prince's eyes. It was just that when she looked at these messy, weird-looking ghost spirits, she was already about to vomit from disgust. That person's eyes contained a deep chill. Just like this, he indifferently stared at the door, staring at these crooked ghost spirits. It was as if what he saw was nothing more than a wisp of spring wind blowing on his face, a wisp of flowing light brushing past. His handsome face was completely unmoved. Only when the bone-piercing cold wind approached him did the steward believe that the talisman masters had said that there were many, many ghost spirits gathered outside. He was just an ordinary person, so he couldn't see where the ghost spirits were. He could only feel the piercing coldness pressing on his skin. Trembling, he raised his head. He didn't know that a group of strange-looking ghost spirits had already crowded around him, practically blocking the entire room. Shen Fei swallowed her saliva. She felt a bit strange. Previously, when these ghost spirits were outside the residence, each and every one of them had impatiently rushed inside. Now that they had finally rushed to the front of the main body, they shrank back and didn't move. Even the ghost spirits knew who was easy to bully and who wasn't to be trifled with, right? It could be said that it was estimated that all the ghost spirits within a radius of 100 li around the southern city had already gathered in this room. The ghost heads were all restless. The dozen or so ghost spirits floating in the front row were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Suddenly, they screamed sharply and rushed to the side of the bed. Although they felt danger, the ownerless body in front of them really made them drool with excitement. It was as if, as long as they could obtain this ownerless body, they could have anything in the world. A bunch of enchanting black flames emerged from Mo Lian's fingers. That speck of fire abruptly expanded, forming a fierce black tiger that eyed Mo Lian covetously as it crouched next to his leg. A series of rapid howls came from the air. The black tiger opened its huge mouth and pounced, swallowing the dozen or so ghost spirits in front of it into its stomach. Of course, this was only what Shen Fei, Fang Su, and Eunuch Hu saw. In reality, the black holy fire had taken the form of a ferocious tiger and burned the dozen or so ghost spirits into ashes. Mo Lien gently put down Arbor, who was lying horizontally in his arms. He didn't seem to move, but in the next moment, he was in front of the many ghosts. His robes fluttered even though there was no wind. Black sparks of fire quickly formed a circle around his body. They exploded at the same time. Streaks of terrifying black flames mercilessly engulfed the ghost spirits in front of them. When he was doing this, there wasn't the slightest fluctuation of emotion in the depths of his eyes. Crown Princess! Shen Fei cried out in surprise. A few little ghost spirits were seen rolling and crawling as they slipped through the gap in the door. They greedily rushed towards Arbor's body. At the same time, an aurora suddenly rushed out from Arbor's body. The ghost spirits who were forced to retreat outside the door by the holy fire didn't know what was going on. They found that their bodies had completely disappeared in the aurora. Chapter 2393. This was really a very sad thing. They had finally managed to save their lives from the terrifying black fire, but unexpectedly, in the next second, they were annihilated by a kind of terrifying aurora of heaven and earth. Their souls were scattered into the air, and they were done for. If one looked carefully, the moment these spirits dissipated at the last moment, they could almost form all kinds of emoticons. Bang! Before Shenzhen and the others could see clearly what had happened, they felt themselves being thrown out of the door by a shock force. Two pieces of door planks in the screen were thrown over one after another, blocking the door and cutting off everyone's view. After Fang Su, Eunuch Hu, and the others were driven out, they all looked at each other in dismay. Mo Lien had thrown everyone out of the room the moment the aurora occurred. He was very sure that those people were only blinded by the aurora for a moment, and did not really see clearly what was inside the little girl's body. Prince Mo walked to the side of the bed and sat down. He stretched out his finger to stroke the little fellow's fair and peaceful face, his gaze calmly lingering on her dantian. There, he could clearly see a ball of white light suddenly appear, and all the spirits turned into ashes in this light. Thinking back to when Jojo's spirit dissipated in the underground base of Dai Zong Mountain, Mo Lien was almost certain that this ball of white light in her dantian was protecting her body. What was this thing? His finger gently stroked her lower abdomen, but he did not probe further. It was better to wait for Jojo to wake up before telling her and let her investigate it herself. Still not coming out. His cold and stern voice rang in the silent room. As soon as his words fell, the whole room was silent, as if the air had also solidified. Rustle, 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 rustle. After a series of crawling sounds, the little treant slowly crawled out from the hair behind the little girl's neck. Its pair of eyes looked somewhat timidly at Mo Lien. Seeing the man's cold and stern gaze sweep over, Chocho suddenly had an impulse to flee. I was only able to come out just now. The little treant hastily crawled out from behind Xiao Mu and jogged up to Mo Lien. It tugged at his sleeve and fluttered before flipping over and jumping onto his arm. Mo Lien glanced at him coldly. Chocho hurriedly poured out everything it could and couldn't. Master's soul has left her body. But don't worry, Master is completely fine. Not only is she fine, but her spiritual sense is also increasing. The more Chocho spoke, the more excited it became. Beaming with joy, it said, I just cut off contact with her. Her spiritual sense body ran away with her soul body. But it's fine, Master, Focus. Chocho swallowed his saliva. Focus, Focus, focus. Master is fine. She's fine. This would be a very good cultivation journey. Although her cultivation base didn't increase by much, her spiritual sense, has skyrocketed all the way. If this goes on, maybe her spiritual sense can break through to deity realm first. Think about it. Cho-Cho's face was full of excitement. It tilted its head and said, whose spiritual sense body can break through to deity realm first before someone who hasn't broken through to deity realm cultivation base? Only our little Master Silver can do it. Where is Jojo now? Mo Lien couldn't stand this long-winded Cho-Cho who didn't get to the point for a long time. She angrily yelled at him. Chapter 2394. The little Treant shrunk its neck. With a timid look, it looked at the man whose expression was so cold that it was somewhat frightening. Cho-Cho shrunk its head and glanced at the man pitifully. Mistress, I don't know. You don't know. Mo Lien didn't get angry and merely uttered these 4 words slowly and faintly. But for some reason, Cho-Cho felt a chill on the top of his head, as if in the next instant, his head would be twisted off by the man in front of him and kicked like a ball. You can't hit me. If you hit me, you'll regret your bad luck. My little mistress won't forgive you. Cho-Cho carried Miss Chiao's banner and cried out anxiously. Where is she? Mo Lien asked coldly. In a very, very cold place. What do you mean? Tell me clearly, why did she leave her body? Why did she go to that cold place? Cho-Cho swallowed his saliva. What was going on? Lord Cho-Cho was actually frightened by this stinky human in front of him. This fellow spoke so logically, grasping the main point in one go. Cho-Cho could not fool him even if he wanted to. Mo Lien raised her eyebrows and stared coldly at Cho-Cho in front of her. Cho-Cho drooped its little head listlessly. Actually, I am not that sure either. Seeing the man in front of him reach out as if to pinch it to death, Cho-Cho jumped in fright and hurriedly explained, Mistress left her body because she wanted to train her spiritual senses. Her spiritual senses are about to break through to the godly realm. Perhaps even she herself is not aware, but the truth is, once her spiritual senses reach the godly realm, she will naturally return to her body. Cho-Cho finished speaking in one breath and looked down, his 2 little branches hanging down and his expression saying that he had already confessed. What attracted her over? Cho-Cho's 2 beady eyes abruptly bulged. How did you know? Fuck. That man had tricked it into revealing everything with one sentence. Cho-Cho used its 2 branches to viciously hit itself and looked at him with an expression that wanted to cry but had no tears. Still not speaking. Mo Lien said coldly. This little fellow still wanted to play these tricks in front of him. That sneaky look of his had already exposed him. Cho-Cho looked at Mo Lien pitifully. It's not Cho-Cho's fault. Speak. A certain person's patience ran out, and he shouted angrily. Cho-Cho rolled onto his arm and pretended to use its 2 branches to cover its non-existent ears. After the primary silver leaves the body, it should be around the body, tempering the body of spiritual sense. It's only because little third called out to her that she floated to that place of extreme cold. Who is Xiao San? Mo Lien curled her lips. Her tone sounded rather calm, but Cho-Cho was trembling like a little sieve. She felt that the man in front of her was inexplicably terrifying. Strange, why did it feel like Xiao San was trying to stir up trouble? Xiao San is Cho-Cho's holy wood. Seed fragments. This time, she confessed everything in one breath. After speaking, she even secretly sized up Prince Mo's calm and unperturbed expression. She only felt that this man in front of her was so shrewd that she couldn't even tell what he was thinking. Chiu-Chiu was a little scared. If only Lord Jojo was here right now. Chapter 2395. In front of Sir Jojo, the Crown Prince would definitely not reveal such a terrifying expression. This two-faced person, this terrifying bad boy, had been glaring fiercely at the little tree. When Little Master returned, Chiu-Chiu would definitely sue him. Evil. Obscene. Mo Lien pressed the little fellow down with a finger and asked coldly, "Can you determine her exact location?" "I'm not sure." Very good." Mo Lien did not say anything, only gently stroking the little tree's head. The little tree felt that its head was a little pitiful, as if it was in danger of being crushed by someone at any time. "Little Seven," Prince Mo calmly called out. "Do you know what to do?" The Crown Prince looked at the little tree ant warmly. Chiu-Chiu shuddered and reflexively carried its little master into Paradise Planet. Did he dare to say that he did not know? In the blink of an eye, the people kneeling in the courtyard heard a loud bang. A golden light rushed out of the side room, broke through the roof, and flew up. Fong Su frowned. When he saw clearly what was hovering above his head, he jumped up in shock and hurriedly ran after it, waving his hands and shouting, "Your Highness! Your Highness! Zhou Huan, the 8 of you will go to the imperial capital on your own." Mo Lien stood on Little Seven's back and instructed with a bland expression. There was no superfluous explanation, nor was there any nonsense. It was purely an instruction. Yes. Zhou Huan obeyed and did not ask any unnecessary questions. Eunuch who also stood up in a panic and hurriedly shouted to the Crown Prince on the dragon's back, "Your Highness, where are you going? You can't just leave like this. His Majesty is waiting for your return in Dragonflame City." "Ah! Your Highness! Your Highness!" They stared blankly at the indifferent master, who didn't even spare them a glance out of the corner of his eye as he rode away on the dragon. Eunuch who was on the verge of collapsing. Fong Su, Commander Fong, was also on the verge of a mental breakdown. At this moment, other than going crazy, he felt that there were no words to express his feelings at this moment. The willfulness of His Highness had already completely exceeded his expectations. Although the heirs of the various princes in the capital were arrogant, they had never been like this before. He clearly knew that the great emperor had been waiting for him in the imperial capital for a long time, but he still did things his own way. He did whatever he wanted to do and ran away without any explanation. How could they endure this? Mo Lien stood on the dragon's back, his eyes indifferently looking into the distance. The gusts of wind that were blowing in his face were completely blocked by him. His hair and clothes were not messed up at all. "I remember that there is an extremely cold place in the Tsang Prefecture," Mo Lien said with an indifferent expression. "The heavenly ice and snow region." Little Seven made a beautiful tail swing and leaped into the sky, drilling into the clouds. Whoosh! A purple feathered arrow brushed past a patch of snow, splashing bits of cold light, and pierced into the hind leg of a snow deer in front of him. The snow deer neighed and immediately fell to the ground, unable to get up. Its hooves crawled twice in the snow, whimpering sorrowfully. Chapter 2396. The third prince was in high spirits as he led a group of guards forward on horseback. He led the people to surround the snow deer. Everyone raised their bows and howled, their voices shaking the heavens and the earth. A bunch of idiots. Miss Chow glanced at them. Those who didn't know better would think that they had hunted a snow leopard. A group of people besieging a low-level spirit beast. The snow deer, which had no offensive power, shot 18 arrows consecutively and barely hit its target. With such archery skills, it was better not to come out and embarrass itself. Rong urged his horse to follow beside Prince Chin. When he turned back, he saw the undisguised contempt in the little ferret's eyes. Why did he feel speechless for some reason? Even a ferret knew how to despise people these days. Little furball, what do you like? I'll shoot it for you to play with. Duan Yu reached out to stroke her furry head as he stared at the icy plains in the distance. The little fellow lazily crawled on her paw. Should I tell the truth? I like super large ice wolves, snow leopards, and big tigers the most. The problem was that this bunch of weaklings only hunted small animals all day long. She didn't like any of them. Look, there's a white-furred silver tiger over there. I'll shoot it down for you to play with, okay? Duan Yu pointed ahead. Sure enough, a vigorous tiger had appeared in the icy plains at some point in time. Third Prince and the others were already on high alert. They stared cautiously at the tiger, afraid that it would suddenly pounce over. Hearing the sound of hooves, Third Prince turned to look and saw Duan Yu spurring a polar ice wolf to gallop past them. That was a level 10 spirit beast, right? Third Prince's pupils contracted as he inwardly thought, if you court death like this, the tiger will kill you one day. Rong was startled for a moment, and the corner of his mouth silently twitched. He glanced sideways at the little ferret in Prince Chen's arms, then looked up at the white-furred silver tiger squatting on the icy plains and eyeing them covetously. A trace of doubt flashed through his mind. Are you sure you're shooting a silver tiger for the little ferret as a pet and not the little ferret for the silver tiger as a pet ferret? Forget it, I'll follow them to take a look. Lest this willful and reckless prince get hurt. 2 streaks of light had already shot out from Duan Yu's fingers, smashing into the silver tiger's feet with a loud bang. This suicidal provocation infuriated the silver tiger, and it abruptly roared. With a leap, it scuttled down from the icy plain and made a beeline for Duan Yu. Just as the polar ice wolf and this white-furred silver tiger were about to collide, Duan Yu leaped up with the little ferret in his arms. He revealed a jade bamboo tube from his sleeve and abruptly shot it at that extremely pitiful silver tiger. They were so close to each other. The explosive power of the 9 jade heavens thunder flung the silver tiger away. It smashed into the thick layer of ice with a bang. Keek, with such a huge impact, it would be strange if the layer of ice did not crack. The silver tiger's expression was also very strange. When it realized that the layer of ice under its body was breaking, it hurriedly crawled with its claws, dragging its painful body, and hurriedly jumped onto another intact piece of ice. Without another word, it turned its head and fled with its tail between its legs. Fuck, the current human was too treacherous. He didn't even use spiritual energy to fight with you. Who knew what he flung at me, but it turned all my snow-white fur black. The white-furred silver tiger leaped from one piece of ice to another. It finally jumped over the broken ice and madly sprinted towards the depths of the icy plains. Unexpectedly, it had only run a few steps when it looked up. Chapter 2397. To its surprise, it saw that grinning human standing in the air before it. When did he run in front of it? Roar! The white-furred silver tiger roared, but the trembling in its roar simply made it blush. What was going on? It was actually frightened by this tiny human, to the point that its organs were about to fall out. A fan had already appeared in Duan Yu's hand, and he winked at the silver tiger with a grin. Are you going to submit, or should I beat you until you submit? The little fellow was curled up in his arms. Even if he didn't look at her, he could sense her happy mood. That pair of beady eyes must be staring intently at this ferocious tiger right now. He knew she liked it. Duan Yu smiled. The white-furred silver tiger really wanted to resist again, but when the man revealed that piece of jade in his sleeve, it looked at its fur flying all over from the explosion. It involuntarily sprawled on the ground. It absolutely wasn't submitting to evil forces. Absolutely not. It was just that there was a saying among humans, a wise man submits to circumstances. The tiger had a flash of inspiration as it thought this. When Sir Jojo returned, he had an additional mount. The little fellow swaggered as she squatted on the silver tiger's head, and they returned to the camp while being watched by everyone. When someone asked, Duan Yu told everyone, little Jiao made a great contribution, so this is her reward. Everyone's jaws dropped to the ground. They didn't understand His Highness Prince Chen's scheme. His reward was a ferocious tiger mount, but he didn't feel that the little fellow's butt was uncomfortable. Sir Jojo naturally didn't care about these people's probing gazes. She was now also a person who reared a tiger. Oh, no, a ferret. The little fellow didn't know that she had already exposed herself to Duan Yu. After washing herself clean, she let the maidservant at the side wipe her fur. Clean and tidy, she slipped into the bed and lay there motionless. She didn't know why, but she kept feeling like she was exhausted every time she woke up these past few days. It was as if she hadn't rested well even in her dreams and always looked tired. His body was really too weak. Even after sleeping for so long every day, he still looked sleepy. Miss Chiao had no idea that little Martin's body did not have enough rest because her soul had been tossing and turning in and out of his body. Late at night, it was raining heavily outside. The bean-sized raindrops hit the tent and woke Miss Chiao up. When she opened her eyes, her soul had already slipped back into little Martin's body. Outside the tent, a person came in against the moonlight and braved the rain. With a head full of wet hair, he went forward and pulled her out of the warm blanket. It's time to go. Isn't it still dark? Why did he have to leave now? The little girl was extremely sleepy. Duan Yu poked her forehead with a smile. All right, continue sleeping. After saying that, he took a small blanket and wrapped her up. He stuffed her into his arms, leaving her two sleepy beady eyes exposed. The little fellow propped up her eyelids. Unable to withstand the tiredness, she went back to sleep. When Duan Yu carried him out of the tent, horses were already neighing and moving outside. The sudden torrential rain made everyone a little flustered. Snowflakes gradually gathered in the rain. It looked like the weather would continue to deteriorate. Roar! The little fellow waved her paw at him. Where's my little tiger? That was her mount. Chapter 2398. Duan Yu pressed down on her small head and stuffed her into his embrace. It's cold. Don't worry, your tiger cub is following behind. It definitely won't fall off. Only then was Miss Chiao satisfied. She shrunk her head into his embrace and even purposely tugged at his lapel to block the whistling cold wind above her head. This body of fur really can't withstand the wind. The little girl thought unhappily. She wondered how her body, which was left behind in the divine province, was doing now. Why do we have to move in this weather? Commandery Princess Xiangchang's shrill shriek came from the camp. Although the maidservants held two umbrellas for her, her clothes were still half-soaked from the howling wind and torrential rain. It was very uncomfortable to stick to her body. Commandery Princess. It's the Emperor's order. I heard that the Board of Astronomy calculated that the weather will be even worse in the future, so we must leave now. Commandery Princess Xiangchang stood there and cursed before getting into the carriage in irritation. The boundless icy plain was currently covered in rain and snow. At first glance, it was foggy, so it was impossible to see the road clearly. Thankfully, other than those delicate royal concubines, everyone else had decent cultivations, so most of them didn't have much of a problem traveling on a rainy day. Duan Yu was worried about his mother, so he mounted the ice wolf and ran to his mother's carriage to instruct the coachman. Because the rain and snow were too heavy, even though he was wearing rainproof clothes, his clothes were almost completely soaked. Noble Consort Duan sat inside the carriage and worriedly lifted the curtain. She called out to him, "Ollie, the rain outside is too heavy. How about you also get in the carriage?" "No need, mother." There were other women in the carriage, so it was naturally very inconvenient for him to get in. It wasn't until the group started moving that Duan Yu returned to the Emperor of Zhangzhou. Dressed in martial attire, the Emperor was riding on a level 12 mystic horse as he narrowed his eyes at the road ahead. They originally planned to set off today, but this vile weather came unexpectedly, so he ordered them to prepare to set off before daybreak. Although it was difficult to travel on rainy and snowy days, how could the children of Zhangzhou be so delicate? The group packed up the food, utensils, and other things. They left the tents there and followed the great emperor back. At this moment, an official from the imperial astronomer with a solemn expression walked forward and saluted the emperor in the rain. "Your Majesty, please give the order to set off quickly. Judging from the weather, a blizzard would arrive in less than 2 hours. At that time, the journey will be even more difficult." And the official's face was full of worry. This humble official thinks that if there is a hailstorm halfway through, the ice layer below will collapse. At that time. The official didn't continue, but the meaning behind his words was clear. If they encountered a large hailstorm and broke through the ice layer, the ice field would collapse and the land beasts would not be able to walk. The great emperor's expression changed slightly. "Pass down the order. Prepare the flying beasts in advance and be on standby. Let's go." In this kind of weather, flying in the rain on a flying beast was obviously even more unwise. The team had been on the road for less than 5 minutes when it was obvious that God was up to something. Several bolts of lightning crashed down with a rumble, causing everyone's expression to darken. A bolt of lightning landed beside the carriage, smashing a deep hole in the ice layer. The horse's hooves were raised in fright, and the carriage driver desperately tried to control the reins. The great emperor hastily shouted, "Go!" Great, it didn't even take 2 hours. The hailstorm didn't fall, and a thunderstorm attacked. Chapter 2399. The lightning struck the glacier, creating several deep craters in it. Everyone only felt the glacier beneath their feet tremble, and cracks that were clearly visible to the naked eye blossomed with a series of terrifying crackling sounds. It was as if everyone would fall into the depths of the icy plains in the next instant. The horses neighed in fright, and the women and children screamed repeatedly. Poof! A tender green thing suddenly shot out from behind the crowd from a crack in the icy plains and whipped the horses' butt with a smack. That unlucky spirit stallion immediately neighed in fright and kicked its front legs. The third prince, who had been sitting upright on the horse's back and doing his best to restrain the horse's agitation, instantly tilted his body along with the upright spirit stallion. Waves of dizziness hit his mind, and a trace of alarm flashed through his eyes. What a joke! How could a good-for-nothing level 5 little mystic cultivator like him withstand this kind of stimulation? Just as he was about to be jolted off the horse, several guards immediately galloped over. One person held his horse down, while the others reached out to support him. The third prince panicked and lost his head as he shouted several times, "Protect your highness! Protect your highness! Protect your highness! Protect your highness!" The little fellow crawled and revealed 2 beady black eyes to glance at the retarded third prince in the carriage. She then looked up to see the indifferent and nonchalant Duan Yu, and several thoughts immediately flashed through her mind. The dragon has 9 sons, and each one is different. Bad bamboo shoots produce good bamboo shoots, and a crooked melon can at least grow a divine flower from a snowy region. Although her long hair was drenched by the rain, Her pair of peach blossom eyes appeared even colder and brighter, giving people a feeling that she was fearless even in the face of great difficulties. Duan Yu's fingers subconsciously rubbed her head that had popped out. He held the reins with one hand and turned to speak with vassal Prince Rong, who had caught up. The group then braved the rain and led the carriages towards the icy plains. A white light suddenly flashed across the horizon, instantly illuminating the icy plains in front of them. A bolt of lightning as thick as the mouth of a bowl drew a crack in the sky and fiercely struck the thick layer of ice. Immediately after, more than a dozen green vines shot out from under the layer of ice, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws to block the carriage's advance. Because the rain was too heavy, the little fellow had already shrunk back into Duan Yu's arms, so she simply did not see the vines shooting out from under the layer of ice to attack. The horses neighed incessantly, and a few Tsang province guards were flung off the back of the spirit stallions. There were even a few horses that couldn't be controlled. They ran wildly with their riders and fell into the cracks in the ice. Both the riders and their horses disappeared without a trace. One of the generals leading the group said with a cold expression, "Everyone, surround him. Protect His Majesty and the concubines. Don't panic. Maintain the formation and keep moving forward." Clap! A bolt of lightning struck the side of the carriage. The coachman gripped the reins with all his might. His face was pale as he tried to control the speed of the carriage. Duan Yu's handsome face darkened as he commanded a group of Tsangzhou guards to step forward to protect her. Afterwards, he patted the head of the polar ice wolf beneath him. With a wave of his sword, he severed 3 to 4 vines and leaped over the intersecting faults, landing firmly on the ground. What's going on? The second prince, who was being protected, was in a state of panic. His face was a little pale. What's under the ice? If elder brother has the leisure to figure out this matter, why don't you run faster and not cause trouble for others? Duan Yu revealed several porcelain-like teeth at him with a spurious smile. The second prince's face darkened, and he was very unconvinced on the inside. Chapter 2400. Although the second prince was aggrieved, he couldn't refute. After all, he was the same as old third, a novice mystic cultivator. Whenever his cultivation was mentioned, he would feel stifled and flustered. But could this be blamed on him? This was completely due to his innate talent, all right. His innate talent was not good, so it could only be said that he was born without the fate of cultivation. However, it was already heaven-defying luck that he could be born into the imperial family. I'm afraid the thing under the ice is about to come out. Rong cracked his whip and chased after Duan Yu's polar ice wolf. We can't continue like this. The caravan is too slow. Organize a group of people to stay behind to cover the retreat, Duan Yu ordered coldly as he glanced at Rong Qing. Don't pick on crooked melons and split jujubes to disgust people. Rong Qing was speechless. She nodded and galloped away on her horse. Not long after, he returned with an elite team. That's all the manpower we can muster. The rest will have to protect His Majesty and the concubines of the various palaces. Enough. Duan Yu nodded. We will stay behind to block the thing that burrows out from the ground. Let the others follow His Majesty first. As they spoke, the rumbling of hooves came from the distance. Rong narrowed his eyes. It seems to be that bunch of brats from Ming province. Don't mind them. Duan Yu glanced over. Do as I say. Rong nodded and arranged for people to follow the caravan. Meanwhile, he led that elite team of more than 20 people to stay by Duan Yu's side. He summoned a long sword that was overflowing with light from his conscience. We haven't been able to compete properly before. Today, I'll show you the gap between us. Duan Yu glanced at him from the corner of his eye and harumphed in high spirits. He suddenly leaped up from the polar ice wolf and pounced towards several vines that had twisted into a ball. Rong didn't get angry and remained aloof. He nodded and said, "All right, this one will wait and see." Swish! A cold arrow shot over first, shooting that ball of rattan branches into pieces. Ming Yasi's arrow came so quickly. Compared to several days ago, he seemed to have recovered quite a bit. Duan Yu creased his brows, but he didn't waste words with him. He directly flicked his sleeve and threw several jasper beads into the emerald green bamboo tube. Duan Yu's motto was to never waste any of his divine energy when he could throw a concealed weapon. Boom! Following the explosion of the Jade Heavenly Thunder, the spirit stallion let out a miserable shriek, and the troops behind Ming Yasi were thrown into chaos. The Jade Heavenly Thunder was flying towards him. At that moment, he felt his heart tighten. He had already abandoned the polar ice wolf under him and flew up. The first to bear the brunt of this attack was the polar ice wolf. It collapsed to the ground, whimpering as it struggled at death's door. Clearly, it was on the verge of death. Ming Yasi floated to the ground and glared at Duan Yu with gritted teeth. This guy's level of treachery had practically exceeded his imagination. The people of the Divine Prefecture and the Zhangzhou were all so cunning. Duan Yu did not look at him, and the raven bone fan in his hand flew out, severing several vines. This time, it seemed to have angered the huge monster under the ice. Countless vines burrowed out again and viciously whipped at the people in front of them at a frenzied speed. Audacious humans, you actually dared to offend Lord Holywood. I'll whip you to death. Swish swish. Swish swish swish. All the vines rushed towards Duan Yu at once, and a few even aimed for his chest. Chapter 2401. This immediately gave Duan Yu a special sense of crisis. He kept feeling that these dozens of vines seemed to be targeting the little white mink he was hiding in his arms. Jojo! What kind of bizarre situation was this? Or could it be that he was just being paranoid and making a mistake? The layer of ice in front of them suddenly cracked open, and Duan Yu and Rong Qing could clearly see what was underneath the layer of ice. That clump of densely packed tree roots was like a giant cocoon in front of everyone's eyes. Meanwhile, the vines that writhed like snakes extended from the tree roots. There was an uncountable number of them, and they seemed to grow endlessly. It was impossible to completely cut them off no matter how hard they tried. Duan Yu creased his brows. The group braved the torrential rain and flew into the air, circling above the tree. As spiritual energy crisscrossed, numerous Zhangzhou and Nether Province guards simultaneously attacked the tree that had suddenly burrowed out from under the layer of ice. Rong Qing's expression was calm, but her gaze was a bit odd. Don't you find it odd that a tree is actually growing under this layer of ice? Odd was odd, but Duan Yu had no time to think about Rong Qing's words in detail. Hundreds of vines swept towards him, as if they wouldn't stop until they killed him. At this time, Miss Qiao, who had been sleeping groggily for a while, poked her head out. She happened to see a large group of people attacking the tree in front of her. Her heart skipped a beat, and the little girl's beady eyes immediately turned round. It was Qiu. To be precise, it should be Qiu's seed fragment. She immediately reacted and jumped out of Duan Yu's arms without a second word. The small blanket that was originally wrapped around her naturally fell off as well. The little snow-white ball swiftly pounced towards the vines on the opposite side. That scene shocked Duan Yu so much that his expression changed drastically, and he immediately withdrew the divine energy he sent out. He then shouted in alarm, "Everyone, stop!" He reached out to grab her, but the little fellow was especially slippery and had already pounced onto one of the very thick vines. Duan Yu caught nothing, but he had already dashed over. When vassal Prince Rong saw this, he also jumped in fright and quickly chased after him. Your Highness Prince Chin, what are you doing? Duan Yu looked in horror at the little snow-white ball sprawled on the vine. He saw her hugging that vine and seemingly turning her head to glance at him. In the next second, she was abruptly dragged into a crack in the ice layer by that thick vine. Jojo! Duan Yu's liver and guts were torn apart. With a cry of alarm, he had already darted over and slid into that crevice with a whoosh. Your Highness! The Zhangzhou guards were scared out of their wits. Now, His Highness actually jumped into that crack of ice layer of his own accord. What was to be done? The Emperor would to them. Stay here. After Chiu you of the U of the Tsin of you of the U of you of the you of the U of you. The group of Zhangzhou guards looked at the two of them with stupefied expressions as they disappeared in front of them without any hesitation. They wished they could beat their chests and cry out loud. Fuck. It was fine if Prince Chin was willful, but why was the usually calm, self-restrained, intelligent, and cautious vassal Prince Qing also so willful? That was Prince Qing's only son, the Princess Consort's pearl. This was bad. If something happened to His Highness and the vassal prince in the underground ice layer, they should be prepared to be skinned alive by the Emperor and Prince Qing and have their entire family exterminated. Chapter 2402. After staring blankly for a moment, Min Yasa's eyes suddenly flickered. He tossed the horsewhip to a Han behind him and coldly said, You guys go out first and wait at Flat Mountain Town. Master! Big brother! Everyone couldn't help but exclaim. Akir ran over, her eyes red. She wanted to grab hold of Dark Yasa's robes, but he waved his sleeve, and with a whoosh, he nimbly charged into the crack in the ice. No one knew what was below the ice. Everyone gathered around and only saw a deep, serene ice cave that seemed to lead to the depths of the Earth's core. They didn't know how far down it was. Akir! Akir! Ahan grabbed the weeping Akir, who wanted to jump down, and angrily slapped her. Are you crazy? With your cultivation, you'll be throwing your life away if you go down. There were many ice caves below, and there were many forks in the road. Who knew which corner they'd slide to if they jumped in? Perhaps they'd be trapped under this glacier forever, unable to come out even if they died. Then what do we do now? Akir's wails shook the heavens as she shrieked, We only came to find a snow domain divine flower, but we didn't find the flower, and we don't know whether His Highness is dead or alive. Do we really have to leave here and wait for him at Flat Mountain Town? Listen to Big Brother. Ahan said with a sullen face. No, I'm not leaving here. I'll wait here for Big Brother Yas to come back. Akir was crying like a tearful doll as she shrieked at everyone. Ahan didn't give her a chance to speak any more nonsense and directly slapped her head, knocking her out. He had two subordinates carry Akir and immediately turned to leave with a sullen face. Ahan had always followed his big brother's orders and never disobeyed them in public but in private. After the noisy group of underworld province guards left, one of the Zhangzhou guards said bitterly, Then what do we do? Send 2 people to the Emperor to report this matter. Everyone looked at each other. Only a fool would report it and directly face the wrath of the Emperor and Prince Qing. The Zhangzhou guards were conflicted and uncomfortable. After Arbor's small body was pulled down by the vine, he slid down the ice hole. The vines were very nimble and flexible. They dragged her back and forth in the honeycomb-like cave, dragging her deeper and deeper. She didn't know if they wanted to drag her into the depths of the Earth's core. The little fellow only felt that his body kept falling down, falling deeper and deeper, but there was not a trace of nervousness in his heart. From time to time, Duan Yu would fling out a burst of divine energy to stop the vine's dragging speed, but overall, it did not have much effect on such a thick sapling. Arbor put its 2 little paws on the vines. Feeling the intimacy of the small tree, it felt a bit happy. Who would have thought that he would be able to see the figure of little Three in this strange trip to the heavenly ice and snow region? According to the ranking of the seed fragments, the person in front of him should be called Little Three. Little Tree only instinctively dragged his little master and ran. In any case, in his days, he only felt that there was something he wanted on that human, so he must obtain it. Otherwise, he might regret it for the rest of his life if he missed it. Now, he felt this little dumpling approaching and feeling her softly hugging him. The sapling's heart leaped with joy, and the memories that originally belonged to him gushed forth in an unending stream. Chapter 2403. Cho-Cho suddenly did a carp flip and squatted on Emolien's shoulder. After carefully sensing for a moment, it said with a comforted expression, "Master is awesome." She found Little Three. Emolien raised her brows. Where? She should still be in that extremely cold place. Emolien's brows knitted together. Can't you summon her soul back? The little Treant lowered its beady eyes. I can't. Ha. Emolien snorted. The little Trent's body shuddered, and it immediately wailed, I'm not omnipotent. Cho-Cho is already very useful. Cho-Cho will be even more useful in the future. Emolien was skeptical about the definition of the word useful. How much longer until we reach that place? Probably another day. The little Treant meekly said softly to its fingers. If we find out that you didn't use your method when you had it, Emolien said faintly, we will kill you. The little Treant pitifully shrunk its small body and chanted again in its mind, when Master comes back, Cho-Cho will definitely fiercely complain. There are also Cho-Cho's seed fragments over there. How can we summon them back? Strictly speaking, they belong to the same body, so there was naturally no distinction between them. When Little Master stayed by Little Three's side, she felt exactly the same as when she stayed by Cho-Cho's side. Emolien didn't say anything else and only ordered 7th Yen to speed up their journey. The little fellow hugged the vine and fell into an ice cave. She twisted and turned along the cave, occasionally glancing back at Duanyu with a conflicted expression. She originally wanted to tell him not to worry, but she freaking shocked herself by letting out an ow when she opened her mouth. In the end, it slid all the way to the bottom. When it flopped and fell into a small ice river, its round body fluttered twice before it was suddenly grabbed by someone. Then, it was lifted up and fiercely pulled into someone's arms. Arbor could hear Duanyu's frantic heartbeat. That indescribably panic-stricken heart was terrifying, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. She reached out her little paw and patted his chest. At this moment, both of them were drenched. Her fur was soaked with water, and now it drooped listlessly in one place. And as Duanyu slid down, his white robes were also torn and tattered by the occasional protruding icicles. Hua! With the sound of water, the roots of the small tree that was originally submerged in the water suddenly opened up and prepared to attack. Roar! The little fellow hastily turned around and roared at him before quickly hugging Duanyu's hand that was about to release this divine energy. Duanyu glanced at her in confusion. You know him. Nodding madly. The little fellow's soft and adorable appearance warmed Duanyu's heart, and he reached out to stroke her head. When Vassal Air Rong worriedly followed over, he couldn't help but be dumbstruck. He saw that His Highness Prince Chin had already changed into a clean set of robes and was hugging a snow-white ball. He was using his divine energy to dry the water stains on her body while also combing her messy fur. In the tranquil ice water, the enormous tree that attacked them earlier was gently sliding its dozens of vines and obediently squatting in the water. It didn't look like it wanted to attack anyone at all. What was going on? Where did this inexplicable sense of harmony come from? Chapter 2404. Vassal Prince Rong dumbfoundedly glanced at Prince Chen before hastily walking forward. Your Highness. Rong Qing's body suddenly tensed, and she reflexively pulled Duan Yu aside. Be careful. Swish. An arrow brushed past Vassal Prince Rong's left shoulder and landed in the frozen river with a bang. The explosion instantly infuriated the sapling that had quieted down, causing it to brandish several hundred vines with bared fangs and brandished claws, attacking a figure. The newcomer was Ming Yasi. He didn't express much shock when he saw the vines attacking him. He merely calmly built an earth wall in front of him. Following that, he took out several fire spirit talismans from his inner world and looked at the sapling in the frozen river with a solemn expression. Swish swish swish. Several fire spirit talismans flew over and directly ignited on the sapling's body. Swish 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 swish. The sapling shook its branches and blocked all the vines in front of it, blocking the surging firepower attack. Bang bang bang. Ow, ow, ow. Seeing the small tree being forced back by the fire talismans and the branches being set ablaze, the little girl was furious. She turned around and roared at Dark Yas. It wasn't that the sapling couldn't deal with this Ming Yasi. Rather, the sapling had just promised her that it would obediently crouch down and not attack people. Duan Yu reached out and pressed down the little fellow's fleshy body that was struggling. Duan Yu directly carried her to the frozen river and glanced at that tree in astonishment before turning back to look at Ming Yasi. Why did you follow us? This Ming Yasi was probably born with a mismatched horoscope. So every time they met, he had the urge to attack. You are Qiao Mu. At this moment, Ming Yasi's gaze was fixated on Qiao Qiao as he sternly enunciated each word. Before jumping into the ice crevice earlier, he clearly heard Duan Yu call out, Jojo. If it weren't for that Jojo, why would Duan Yu jump into the ice crevice without hesitation? Miss Qiao was instantly enraged. Although no clues could be seen on the snow-white little marten's face, Ming Yasi had a strange feeling. He was certain that what he had said was the truth. No wonder when I saw this little guy, I couldn't help but like him. No wonder that guy Duan Yu ran off after snatching her. All the strange things that had happened before could be explained with words at this moment. A faint smile appeared on Ming Yasi's grave and stern face. He looked up at Duan Yu and Rong Qing, then looked up at the thick glacier. Duan Yu, do you suddenly feel like continuing the sparring just now? Duan Yu gave him a, do you think I'm scared of you, look. Mayas didn't say another word as he shot out a few more arrows. His body flew over as a stream of flowing earth spirits surged through the ground. Duan Yu sneered. With a wave of his hand, several hundred ice spikes suddenly broke free from the surrounding ice walls and whooshed toward Dark Yas. Idiot! Fighting with him in a space filled with water spirit force. Courting death. The several hundred ice spikes were all blocked by a transparent earth wall. A cold glint flickered in Duan Yu's eyes. With a wave of his hand, the raven bone fan transformed into a long sword. Don't blame the heavens and accuse others for courting death. Crack! What the hell was that sound? Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. All of a sudden, the entire layer of ice beneath their feet fell down. Everyone was speechless as they abruptly fell down along with the broken layer of ice. Chapter 2405. Miss Qiao, who was squatting at the side and watching, instantly felt that something was amiss. Just as she wanted to escape, her petite body was already coiled up by a vine, and she involuntarily fell down with it. Thankfully, the drop wasn't too high. In a flash, Duan Yu, Rong, Ming Yasi, and the others all landed on the ground. Their bodies swayed slightly when they stepped on the slippery ice layer, but they steadied themselves. Plop! The little girl fell from above and plunged headfirst into a pile of ice dregs. It hurt so much that her hair stood on end. Duan-yu twitched his mouth, and his figure flashed to her side. He quickly picked her up from the pile of ice dregs and helped her remove a few pieces of ice from her forehead before rubbing her head. Your Highness. Rong's feeble voice was heard. Duan-yu turned around with the little fellow in his arms, and his pupils contracted abruptly. Miss Chiao, who was in his arms, was startled for a second before she suddenly cheered with a howl. She squirmed her limbs, wanting to jump down from Duan-yu's arms. Wah wah wah. Wah. There were actually several hundred snow domain divine flowers planted here. Their growth was delightful, and each of these snow domain divine flowers was clearly better than the one they obtained earlier. Especially the largest snow domain divine flower in the center. Wah! This was a super sacred grade medicinal herb, right? Jojos, they were all Jojos. The little fellow excitedly rolled around in Duan-yu's arms and impatiently wanted to roll down, but he reached out to stop her. Don't mess around, can you even pick them with your small body? Miss Chiao instantly wilted. Oh right, the snow domain divine flowers before her looked extremely beautiful, but she raised her hand to look at her small claws, and she was so miserable that she wanted to vomit blood. She couldn't pick them. Even if she picked them, there was no place to store them. This was equivalent to looking at a large piece of fatty meat in front of her, but she couldn't eat it. So painful. Jojo's small eyes were so sorrowful that tears could drip out. Duan-yu, who had been observing her expression, silently twitched his mouth. His fingers brushed past her furry head, and he coughed lightly and said, "If you howl once, I'll help you pick them. If you howl twice, I'll help you pick them all." Howl. Why is my great aunt howling? Why did she feel like she had been tricked by Duan-yu, this damn fool? Something felt wrong. Duan-yu couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. In the end, he barely managed to restrain himself, but he couldn't suppress the smile on his face no matter what. Rong was speechless. Roar! Lord Jojo's eyes suddenly lit up. She stared at Mingyas, who had already plucked a snow domain divine flower and turned to look at her. Crawl, crawl, crawl. Miss Chiao clung to Duan-yu's lapel with all her might, and the latter helplessly patted her head. All right, I got it. I'll pick it now. The strange thing was that Mingyasi only took one stalk of the snow domain's divine flower before standing aside and coldly watching Duan-yu busying himself. Lord Jojo secretly waved his little paw and thought to himself, at least he knows what's good for him. This guy must have felt that he couldn't beat Duan-yu and Rong with 2 fists, so he decided to be obedient. The little fellow squatted on the side and occasionally extended her paw to give directions. Duan-yu's method of plundering the snow domain's divine flowers was quite practiced. He clearly didn't look like someone who was harvesting medicinal herbs for the first time. As long as one didn't get close to the flower, it was very convenient and simple to use divine energy to envelop things from a distance. It wasn't long before Duan-yu collected an entire patch of snow domain's divine flowers into his storage talisman. Chapter 2406. After Duan-yu dug out the divine flower of the snow domain, a shallow pit was revealed at the bottom. Arbor's sharp eyes noticed that there seemed to be something bright inside the pit. It shook its eyes and then rolled over. It rolled especially smoothly and quickly. The corners of the mouths of the people nearby twitched when they saw that greedy look. Miss Chiao only realized something was wrong after rolling over. Why was it that whenever she ran away now, it was only logical for her to roll? Was this appropriate? The little fellow had already seen what was inside the pit. It was a transparent treasure crystal about the size of her body. There was a blood-red color in the crystal's center. What kind of good stuff was this? It looked extraordinary at first glance, so it must be a very rare tool refinement material. The lotus that was given to her. A certain little eye curved. When Duan Yu and the others walked over, they saw that little fellow hugging the treasure crystal about the size of her body and turning around unsteadily. Suddenly, a red light shot out from the treasure crystal. Duan Yu's eyes turned cold, and he swiftly rushed forward to scoop up that little fellow. Jojo. In their panic, Duan Yu didn't care about formalities and directly called her by her name. However, Miss Chiao was a bit dizzy and paralyzed in his palm. The red light that shot out of the precious crystal entered her soul body in an instant. Even her spiritual sense body, which had been lying lazily on its back, seemed to be stimulated and jumped up with a whoosh. Jojo, Jojo. Duan Yu was inexplicably flustered. He reached out to rub her small head, but she didn't react at all. The three of them saw the red light flash earlier, but now, the little fellow suddenly fainted. Rong walked up to take a look. When he saw that this little ferret's breathing was steady, as if she had only fainted temporarily, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "It should be fine. Let's lay it flat for a look first." Duan Yu didn't let go of her and looked up at the transparent crystal that fell to the ground. His handsome brows furrowed. "Is this a great void treasure crystal?" Crown Prince Rong picked up the crystal, turned around, and nodded at him. "It looks 70 to 80% similar. Then there should be no problem." Duan Yu quickly calmed down. Legend has it that the crystal core inside a great void treasure crystal can greatly increase spiritual consciousness. It can be considered an item that can only be encountered by chance, Duan Yu murmured as he looked down at the little fellow in his arms. "What are you doing?" Ming Yasi's voice rang out from beside him. Duan Yu looked up and saw that the cluster of trees that had been quietly sitting in the ice river suddenly spread out its vines and swiftly swam towards them. Its appearance was very strange. It looked like a tree, but it was wrapped in a cocoon by countless vines. It was impossible to see its original appearance. Say it's not a tree. But it didn't feel like anything else. Duan Yu narrowed his eyes and retreated 2 steps with the little girl in his arms. He shouted with uncertainty, "Stop!" The sapling did stop, but it still bared its fangs and brandished its claws at Duan Yu and the others to express its displeasure. Of course it was dissatisfied. Master Silver was fine just now and was with these 3 people. In less than 2 minutes, Master Silver fainted. "Don't worry, she's fine," Duan Yu reflexively said and stroked Miss Chiao's furry head. "Let her slowly absorb the crystal core. She should wake up soon." Ming Yasi glanced at the sapling from the corner of his eyes. "What the heck is this?" Chapter 2407. Duan Yu was in a bad mood, so he naturally couldn't be bothered with this fellow. Ming Yasi couldn't help but shout angrily, "Don't think I want to waste my breath with you. If it weren't for Jojo, I wouldn't even bother with you." Duan Yu expressionlessly glanced at him, looking like he couldn't be bothered with this person. Ming Yasi couldn't help but be infuriated. "Humph, the reason I didn't fight over the Snow Domain's divine flower with you is that I only need 1 stalk. I'll leave the rest to Jojo." "It's not for you." Duan Yu rolled his eyes at him. Rong, why did he feel like these 2 people's conversation was so childish? Oh wait, it was His Highness Yasi. So childish. His Highness Prince Qin simply ignored him, so it was clear that he couldn't be bothered to talk to him. Ming Yasi shouted at Duan Yu again, "How do we get out?" Duan Yu also knitted his brows when he looked up at the thick layer of ice above them. When he first came down, he followed the tree and slid all the way down through the honeycomb-like ice caves. Now that they wanted to go back up, it seemed a bit difficult. Unless they could find their original path and go back up, or they could directly break through the layer of ice above. However, it looked like these two possibilities were minuscule. They could tell with a glance how thick the layer of ice was above them. It wasn't impossible for the three of them to break through this layer of ice if they combined their strength, but not this way. It would take some effort, and the three of them would have to cooperate well. From the looks of it, it was most likely impossible to get Ming Yasi to cooperate with them. Rong Qing said, "Let's try to find the passage up later." "Find the passage?" Ming Yasi harumphed. "Easy for you to say. When I jumped down just now, I had to make so many turns that I don't even know how many ice caves I went through. If I could go back the way I came, why would I stay here and wait for you guys?" Duan Yu swept him a glance. "You punk, you're so noisy. Why don't you tell me what good idea you have?" "Me." Ming Yasi stiffened his neck and was about to speak. The three of them suddenly discovered that the entire layer of ice was shaking slightly from a shock. Crown Prince Rong's expression changed slightly. It seems to be a wave of energy coming from above. Duan Yu retreated a few steps with Miss Chiao in his arms. The sapling naturally moved its countless branches and slid along with Duan Yu. Seeing this, Ming Yasi hurriedly asked, "Where do you want to take her?" "Put it down." Although he didn't know what the little lady was up to make her look so bizarre, reason told him that he could ask about this kind of thing later. Right now, he should snatch the little lady from Duan Yu's hands first. Opportunity knocks but once, when will such a good opportunity come again? When Duan Yu saw NEAs pouncing over and reaching out to grab Arbor, who was in his arms, Duan Yu spun around to evade his fingers. He brandished a chilling ice blade and bellowed, "What are you up to now?" At this moment, the trembling of the ice layer seemed to be increasing in intensity. As long as one wasn't deaf, they should be able to hear what was going on above. "Someone is chipping away at the ice." Crown Prince Rong frowned and pointed upwards. "Right above us." Boom! Bang! Bang! The dragon claw slammed down more than a dozen times in a row. The glaciers in this area all made cracking sounds under this huge force. Mo Lian apathetically stared at the sapling squatting on the dragon's head. "You're not mistaken." Chapter 2408. Master is down there. Master is down there. Chiu Chiu shouted. "I can feel it." What kind of relationship did he have with Master? It would be strange if he couldn't feel her aura at such a close distance. Mo Lian knew Little Tree's abilities and nodded without any doubt. She followed Seventh Yan's lead and stabbed the Raven Moon's sword into the broken ice on the ground. Divine power surged in his hands that held the sword. The thick layer of ice under his feet trembled and roared as he poured his divine power into it. Pang! The entire layer of ice shattered into pieces. "Who are you?" "Quick, protect His Highness." The Zhangzhou guards heard the news and rushed over. When they saw Mo Lian and Seventh Yan's actions, they were flustered. What were they doing? They were actually chiseling the ice here. Didn't they know that the entire glacier would continue to sink and crack? Wouldn't it be easy for the people below to get hurt as well? There was a golden dragon coiled beside the man in front of them. This dragon looked like it was only in disguise and didn't reveal its true size. However, the aura of a sacred beast was still present. Crown Prince Mo examined the royal guard's attire and asked with a frown, "Zhangzhou guards. Why were the Zhangzhou guards here?" This was the Ice Sky Snow region, a cold place. Normal people wouldn't come here at all. Thus, the Zhangzhou guards had only set up 3 spots for them to guard. It was impossible for a group of people to suddenly appear here. Could it be that the Zhangzhou Emperor came to hunt? Oh no, oh no. Master seems to be leaving us. Master is running away. Little Tree suddenly shouted and pointed to the front left. It's Third. My Third is up to no good. Little Tree was so anxious that it stomped its feet. If Third ran away, how could it take back its seed fragments? If it didn't take them back, how could it advance and grow? Mo Lien grabbed Little Tree and threw it on her shoulder. Then, she called Seventh Yen to fly over. After a whooshing sound, Yen Chi's long dragon tail broke half of the ice layer with a crack. The Tsang province guards all cried out in alarm, leaping up to avoid the layer of ice that had suddenly sunk in. At the same time, Duan Yu and vassal Prince Rong jumped out from a cracked ice cave. Duan Yu's expression froze, and he quickly turned around to chase after a certain place. Earlier, when the ice cave was shaking, that lump of tree used its vines to drag the unconscious little white ferret in his arms away. It was so fast that Duan Yu was unable to react in time. He didn't know what the hell it was, but a tree came out to mess things up. It actually wanted to carry the little girl and run away alone. He didn't know where it got its guts from. The next person to emerge from the ice cave was naturally Ming Yas. Looking up to survey his surroundings, Ming Yasi also chased after Duan Yu without another word. Is that your seed fragment? Prince Mo asked coldly. At this moment, he had already seen clearly what the huge lump in front of him was. Don't be fooled by the fact that it looked like a tangled mess. In fact, it was a tree made up of countless vines. Cho nodded guiltily. Although its seed fragment may have only developed a bit of intelligence, it doesn't affect its desire to get close to Little Master at all. Make it stop, Mo Lien said after a long silence. Chapter 2409. Although Prince Mo's tone was very calm, Cho could detect a hint of murderous intent in his nonchalant tone. It was as if if he couldn't stop Little Three in front, Crown Prince the Great would very likely charge up and directly cripple Little Three. So scary. The little tree ant reflexively reached out to touch its branches. In an instant, it sent out countless vines that scattered straight ahead. Whoosh! Duan Yu's figure caught up and paused in midair, startled. Mo Lien. Why did this fellow suddenly appear here? Duan Yu was a bit curious, but he had already landed beside Mo Lien. When Mo Lien saw him chasing over, her eyes were also a bit curious. Why are you here? Could it be that he really accompanied the great emperor of Zhangzhou to the heavenly ice snow region to hunt? Have you seen my wife? Prince Mo didn't wait for Duan Yu's reply and hastily asked again. Duan Yu's expression was a bit odd as he sized him up. Then, he nodded and pointed ahead. Prince Mo, Prince Mo, when you see Jojo later, you'll definitely be in for a huge surprise. Duan Yu harumphed, and with a slight stomp, he had already flown several meters away. Soon, the two of them paused. Cho exerted force and used strands of glistening emerald vines to latch onto a certain tree that was madly sprinting across the icy plain. Little Three, stop fooling around. Where's our little master? The little tree ant jumped down from Mo Lien's shoulder and shot into the air with a whoosh. It wobbled and somersaulted a few times before landing on that tree that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. A snow-white little ferret was currently lying quietly inside a clump of vines. The little trent's face instantly darkened, and it raised its paw to point at the little ferret. Master! Master! He pounced over and used his two thin and weak branches to push the little Master Silver's fleshy body. He repeatedly cried out, Master Silver, my poor Master Silver, what's wrong with you? Wake up quickly. Don't tell me you were tricked by this little ferret. Mo Lien and Duan Yu, who had followed along, looked at each other in bewilderment before turning to look at that well-composed tree. Stop shaking her. Duan Yu couldn't resist shouting, she accidentally swallowed the crystal core of the Great Void treasure crystal just now. It will probably take a while before she wakes up. If it wasn't for this messy tree that suddenly snatched Jojo and ran away, perhaps Jojo would have already woken up by now. It's all this weird tree's fault. It's so noisy. My poor Master Silver. The sapling wailed and slapped away Duan Yu's outstretched hand with its vines. No one is allowed to touch my family's little master. Master! Wake up, Chocho is here. Who exactly bullied you? On the vast icy plain, the sapling's shouts reverberated back and forth between the empty layers of ice. That's enough. Mo Lien speechlessly twitched her mouth. She picked up that wailing little tray ant and tossed it to the side. Her gaze naturally landed on that little ferret. Her heart skipped a beat. Duan Yu, are you pleasantly surprised? Are you surprised? Meanwhile, Mo Lien stared fixedly at that little snowball, a captivating inky light flowing in her phoenix eyes. Jojo, it was Jojo. He didn't care no matter what kind of oddity his little miss turned into. As long as he could see her, his heart would feel more at ease. Chapter 24:10. Bam! Ming Yassi's head was smacked away by the dragon tail, and he instantly flew out. Seventh Yen roared and circled in a circle. He raised his dragon claw and symbolically waved it at Ming Yassi a few times. Such a big commotion only attracted Duan Yu and Mo Lien's glances before they promptly looked away. Duan Yu, at least you're smart enough to send someone to stop that punk. That fellow nearly annoyed me to death the entire way. Mo Lien cast a sidelong glance at Duan Yu as she reached out to hug that small figure. Unexpectedly, the little fellow moved her small head and suddenly opened her eyes. A pair of black, beady eyes warily looked ahead. When she clearly saw the two people standing in front of her, Arbor almost couldn't believe her eyes. What did she see when she opened her eyes? Why was hubby here? Could it be that she was dreaming? This string of questions made the little fellow dizzy. She reached out her small paw, wishing for nothing more than to pinch herself to see if she was dreaming. But she soon discovered that her small body was being picked up by someone, and a pair of gentle hands embraced her furry body. Arbor looked up and saw that pair of phoenix eyes silently looking at her with a grin. The little fellow cheered in delight and delight. She rolled around in Crown Prince Mo's arms and reflexively hugged his neck with her small hands. However, when she reached out, she discovered that her pitifully short paws couldn't wrap around the man's neck at all. Instead, she directly pounced on the Crown Prince's face and hung there comically. Regardless of whether the Crown Prince was mentally breaking down, he still pulled Miss Chow off his face with a deadpan expression. Seeing that she was in low spirits, her pair of small eyes gazed at him resentfully. The Crown Prince had to stifle his laughter as he gently comforted her. It's fine, Jojo. You'll come out very soon. Don't be scared, hubby will definitely help you come out of this body. Miss Chow immediately turned her head and aimed her small butt at his face, looking like she didn't want to acknowledge him. What was going on? She was fine just a moment ago and looked very happy to see him. Why was his butt facing her in less than 3 seconds? Prince Mo turned to look at Duan Yu in confusion. The latter was speechless. What's with that expression? His eyes were filled with resentment for failing to meet expectations. What a joke. Little dumpling, come here. Duan Yu patted Miss Chow with an expression that said, quickly come into my arms. Sir Jojo wagged his tail and glanced at him. He suddenly tossed Prince Mo aside and naturally didn't jump into Duan Yu's arms. Instead, he directly jumped off the glacier and trotted towards the front of the ice field. Mo Lien. Wife, don't run. With your short legs, it'll take a lot of effort to run. Let your husband carry you over. Duanyu thought she was caught off guard by a bowl of dog food. She felt like killing someone. What should she do? The little girl ran ahead, not even turning her head back. She also ignored the two of them. Mo Lien was baffled. The little fellow was clearly very happy to see him just now. Duanyu, what's going on? Duanyu looked at him like he was looking at an idiot. Prince Mo, you're the idiot. Come back, what's going on? Duanyu rolled his eyes at him irritably. Where's your wife here? Isn't that Jojo? There's no Jojo. Idiot. Try calling her Jojo and see if she responds to you. Mo Lien. Chapter 24:11. So that's why. Mo Lien instantly understood. Jojo was shy. Right. With Sir Jojo's personality, there was no way he would admit that he was trapped inside a little ferret's body and couldn't get out. Mo Lien felt like he had discovered the truth. He quickly leaped up and asked Duanyu, what did you call her just now? Duanyu silently lowered his eyes. Little furball. Mo Lien hastily complied and called out, little dumpling. Little furball, wait. He leaped up and bent down to pick up the little girl who was running all over the ground. He said with a grin, little furball. Bah. You're the little furball. Miss Chow expressionlessly glanced at him. Little furball, be good. Let's get to know each other. I am Mo Lien. This is our first time meeting, but I will take good care of you in the future. Don't worry. The crown prince pinched her little hands and feet and thought, compared to his soft baby, this really paled in comparison. Arbor, that it felt like he was giving himself away. Duanyu couldn't resist covering his face. He used to think that this Prince Mo was quite wise and farsighted. He didn't expect him to be a retard. Let's return to Flat Mountain Town first. Duanyu said with a taut face. Flat Mountain Town was the closest large town outside of the Heavenly Ice and Snow region. The Empress and the rest were frightened, so they would probably rest in Flat Mountain Town for a day or two before setting off for the capital. Prince Mo still felt tired. His wife was clearly right next to him, but he still had to pretend to not know her. It couldn't be helped. He had to take care of his wife's emotions. The little white ferret was expressionless, but its beady black eyes kept darting around. It would take at least 4 hours to travel from the Heavenly Ice and Snow region to Flat Mountain Town. In addition, the storm had raged for more than half a day. Not only did the rain not stop, but it even showed signs of intensifying. It was very difficult to travel, so it would take even longer. Fortunately, the lightning and thunder had stopped. In order to leave this place earlier, Mo Lien summoned Little Seven and left with Duanyu and Rongqing. After being pestered by Yan Chihu for a while, Ming Yas had no choice but to summon the Python Bull with a furious expression. He then rushed to Flat Mountain Town as well. Along the way, Ming Yasi was naturally in a bad mood. By the time they reached Flat Mountain Town, it was already late at night. They had been tossing and turning since early in the morning until now, causing everyone to be thrown off their feet and exhausted. Yas and the others naturally caused quite a commotion when they rushed back. As for noble consort Duan, she actually hadn't closed her eyes this entire time. It wasn't until she heard the news of Duanyu's return that she anxiously came out to see her son and tugged at Duanyu for a long chat. There was only one large inn in Flat Mountain Town. With the Emperor's power, it was impossible for him to stay in that inn. Officials had already booked the residence of the wealthiest family in Flat Mountain Town to settle down the Emperor and his concubines. The Nether Province guards also did the same. However, the best residence had already been requisitioned by the Emperor of Zhangzhou and his entourage, so they had no choice but to find another large residence and make do with it for now. Hence, Prince Mo, who was all alone, decided to bring his little miss to the inn to make do for the night. When he turned around and saw Duan Yu's hesitant expression, Prince Mo tightly hugged the little white ferret protectively. "What are you doing?" Duan Yu rolled his eyes at him. "Stop fooling around and come back with me." Chapter 24:12. Mo Lian raised her eyebrows slightly and glanced at Duan Yu, but she didn't reject his good intentions. After all, the inn's doors should have been closed long ago in this ghastly dark weather. Under the servant's lead, the three people walked into the depths of the courtyard one after another. Duan Yu and Rong didn't mention Prince Mo's identity, so the crown prince naturally wouldn't mention it himself. The servants only thought that he was a friend of Prince Chen or Rong. The servants carried lanterns and umbrellas in front of them before they reached the door of a wing room. Then, he heard the door of another room creak open. A woman in plain white clothes stepped out from inside and called out, "Big brother Ali." Seeing Commandery Princess Xiangchang pouncing over, Duan Yu dodged to the side without even looking up. He turned to roar at the servant, "How did you arrange the rooms?" There were many people in the emperor's party for the winter hunt, so this temporary residence wasn't as spacious as the temporary imperial residence. With so many people, it wasn't easy to arrange the courtyards. However, Duan Yu wasn't stupid enough to believe that the steward who arranged the courtyards would be so audacious as to assign him to the same courtyard as Xiangchang and do such an unreliable thing. Were they blind? Didn't they know that men and women were different? The servant who was leading the way almost dropped the lantern in his hand. He hurriedly cried out in panic, "Commandery Princess! Commandery Princess, aren't you staying in the left side courtyard?" Of course, the steward wasn't so stupid as to arrange Prince Chen, Rong, and the other men to the same wing room as Xiangchang unless he was really out of his mind. Duan Yu's face darkened. He was already mentally exhausted after a day of torment, and his mood was definitely not good right now. His words were no longer as calm and indifferent as before, and he immediately retorted, "Are you all idiots? Hurry and get her out of here. Scram far away and don't let me see her again." Xiangchang Commandery Princess looked like she was about to cry as she pitifully gazed at Duan Yu. "Brother Ali, I'm so worried about you that I can't sleep." Duan Yu had long lost all tolerance for this woman, so he merely looked at the servants impatiently. "Why aren't you throwing her out? Do you want me to do it myself?" The servants did not dare to hesitate. A few of them hurried forward and asked Princess Xiangchang to leave with a wry smile. Commandery Princess Xiangchang was infuriated. She snapped, "Who dares to touch me?" Relying on the power of her father, Marquis Anxing, and the title of Xiangchang Commandery Princess, she really intimidated people for a while. The group of servants only felt that both sides were not human, and cold sweat was about to drip down their foreheads. Unexpectedly, as soon as Xiangchang Commandery Princess finished speaking, she found herself flying in the air. She was directly swept out of the door with a palm strike. "Ah!" Commandery Princess Xiangchang's cry broke the silence of the night. Duan Yu coldly said, "If she keeps making a fuss, I'll gag her mouth." Xiangchang's screams finally ended. After watching vassal Prince Rong enter the side room, Duan Yu dismissed the accompanying servants and followed Mo Lian into a side room. After tossing and turning for so long, Miss Chiao's ferret body was already exhausted and had already fallen asleep. Mo Lian turned to glance at Duan Yu before setting up a defensive boundary inside the room with a wave of her hand. "Come with me." Duan Yu raised his brows. In the next instant, the scenery before him changed, and he was instantly dragged into a peach forest by a tree vine. "This is Master." The little tree ant wailed as it rushed over while brandishing its 2 branches. Chapter 24:13. Duan Yu took a closer look. Wasn't the deformed tree that attacked them in the heavenly snow domain following behind the little tree ant? This is the holy wood. Mo Lien glanced at the fellow who was wailing to the heavens and pouncing on the little white ferret and reflexively rubbed her head. This is Qiao Qiao's spiritual domain's paradise planet. Mo Lien beckoned at him. Duan Yu looked around in surprise before following Mo Lien to a peach tree. His gaze naturally landed on Jojo, who was lying under the tree. At this time, the little white ferret's body had also undergone a transformation. Jojo's soul left the little white ferret's body on its own again. Her eyes were half closed as she floated in the air to continue cultivating her spiritual conscious. After consuming the core of the great void crystal, her spiritual conscious broke through several realms at once. Unfortunately, she was still a distance away from the god realm. Hence, every time the little white ferret fell asleep, Jojo's soul would wander out on its own to cultivate her spiritual conscious. Duan Yu glanced at the little fellow's sleeping appearance, and his complicated gaze roved over her body. Now that the body is here, why doesn't the soul return? Duan Yu couldn't resist asking. When he looked up, he saw Mo Lien frowning, seemingly also considering this question. The little tree ant quickly interjected, "I know this." The 2 people's gazes landed on her at the same time. The little tree ant felt a great pressure, so she waved her branches and hastily explained, "That's because the setting of that soul-departing talisman should be for Master to advance her spiritual conscious to the god realm. Only then can she complete the soul-departing cultivation process." In other words, Jojo could only end this so-called training if she advanced her spiritual conscious to the god realm. The 2 men looked at each other in bewilderment. She made the soul-departing talisman herself? Duan Yu silently twitched his mouth. He kept feeling that there should be a rather hilarious story behind this soul-departing talisman. The little tree ant nodded solemnly before saying, "But I advise you not to mention this in front of her." The 2 men, Master will never admit it. The little tree ant jumped up, waved its 2 branches, and paced back and forth in front of them. "Let me put it this way. In this state, Master will definitely not acknowledge the 2 of you. Don't do anything stupid. If you slap my master's face, my master will definitely ignore you for a year and a half." The 2 of them were speechless. "You don't need to tell us, we already know." The little tree ant turned to look at them with a serious expression, its small black eyes shining brightly on the tree trunk. "Let me give you some advice. Master was about to wake up. Just pretend that you don't know her later. Just ignore her." The 2 of them were speechless. They looked at each other and felt that the tree ant in front of them was a little unreliable. The little emperor is such a particular person. If you ignore her, how can you end up well? Then tell us, roughly when will Jojo be able to break through to the god realm? It couldn't be that it would take 3 to 5 years, right? When Mo Lien thought of having to hug a ferret and call her wife for 3 to 5 years, she felt especially miserable, and her lips started twitching. The little tree ant waved its branches and said carelessly, "Don't worry about this. Chio will calculate with his fingers. I'm going home late today, so there are 3 more days until I'm late." Chapter 24:14. 2 days at the soonest, 5 days at the latest. Master will definitely be able to break through to the divine conscious realm. Really? Of course. Don't tell me you absorbed the great void crystal's crystal core for nothing. The little tree ant harumphed and haughtily raised its small tree head. That's for sure. My master is such a strong person. Don't tell me she needs 3 to 5 years to absorb that bit of crystal core. Don't worry. She'll be done in 7 days at the latest. You just said 5 days at the latest. Duan Yu reminded exasperatedly. Cho glared fiercely at him. So long-winded. The two men, Don't think we can treat you as Jojo just because you pretend to be a Jojo. Your incoherent words don't change the fact that you're a mentally retarded tree. Didn't you say Jojo was about to wake up? The little tray ant threw Mo Liena, are you dumb? Look, and then said, when did I say Master was about to wake up? Wait here. After saying that, he waddled over to the little white mink's side and squeezed aside the little water child and little earth child squatting next to her. What are you two doing? Why are you squatting here and looking at Master instead of doing something proper? Cho, why did Master turn into a mink? Cho, when exactly can Master return to her original body? Soon. 10 days at the latest, the little tray ant said seriously. Mo Lien slammed Cho's tree head and roared at him, one moment it's 5 days, the next it's 7 days, the next it's 10 days. I'm telling you, 5 days at the latest. If Jojo doesn't recover in 5 days, I'll throw you. Swish. Cho thought of something and quickly picked up the little white mink's body and ran towards Fish Orchid Planet. Come with me. Let Master go to Fish Orchid Planet to cultivate spiritual conscious. It can shorten the time. Sure enough, he ran off the moment he picked up the little white mink. On the other side, Jojo's soul, who was originally cultivating in midair, fluttered away with the little white mink. Mo Lien had long known how unreliable the tiny tray ant was. However, this was the first time Duan Yu was aware of this guy's personality. He approached Mo Lien and asked, is that deformed tree behind us related to that sacred wood? You mean that tree? Mo Lien glanced at the broken tree that had been following his little girl all along and said mildly, it's a fragment of Cho's seed. Strictly speaking, it should be a part of Cho's body. However, only when Jojo returns to his main body can he absorb this seed fragment into his body and merge it with Cho. Duan Yu nodded. In that case, that tree actually attacked us in the ice heaven snow region because it wanted to get close to Jojo. He even fought over the Jojo. No wonder that strange tree kept competing with him and insisted on stealing the Jojo and running away. Duan Yu strolled around Fish Orchid Planet with Mo Lien and marveled at this little lass. Only then did he leave with Mo Lien. After the exhaustion from last night's journey, Her Majesty the Empress and several royal concubines had fallen ill. Hence, the Emperor ordered them to continue staying in Flat Mountain Town for a few more days until the Zhangzhou Empress's health improved a bit before returning to the capital. One day later, Arbor woke up and expressionlessly looked at the 3 little ones squatting in front of her. The water child was the first to reach out a chubby, translucent arm that resembled a lotus root and pounced over, calling out, "Moss." Chapter 24:15. Slap. A slap landed on the head of the little water baby without holding back. Cho glared at him fiercely. Idiot. Call her Lord Little Dumpling. The water child glanced at Arbor aggrievedly and poked Arbor's furry front paw. Lord Little Dumpling. I am Little Dumpling. Do you want to eat something? Miss Chiao had already discovered that she was on Fish Orchid Planet. With a glance, he saw her body lying on a rock not far away. Her stomach was covered with a small blanket. Her sleeping appearance was very serene, and her cheeks were very rosy and glossy. She didn't look like someone who had been unconscious for more than 10 days and still looked very energetic. Miss Chiao hurriedly ran to his side and wagged her little tail, running back and forth around his body. Anxious, extremely anxious. Logically speaking, this soul-departing curse had been in effect for so many days, so why hadn't it worn off yet? Now that she saw her body but couldn't enter, Lord Jojo felt a bit dejected. He was not happy. She raised her paw and felt even more unhappy when she saw her current appearance. Ciao. Little dumpling. When Mo Lien received the sapling's message, he naturally ran to Fish Orchid Planet to visit his wife. At the same time, he also couldn't shake off Duan Yu. Miss Chow expressionlessly looked at her dear husband as he picked her up and carefully examined her from head to toe. Your body condition is quite good. Little dumpling, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? You're the little dumpling. Upon hearing this strange name, Arbor speechlessly turned his head away. Lord Little Dumpling is quite well right now. The sapling deliberately raised its voice and said, at this rate, you'll recover your original appearance in less than 3 days. Miss Chiao's ears secretly perked up as she listened to Chiu Chiu's words. The Great Void Crystal's crystal core is almost depleted. When it accumulates to a certain level, it'll definitely form a sea of rivers and smoothly enter the God Realm Divine Consciousness stage. At that time, you'll definitely see a different conscious. So that was it. Miss Chiao wagged her tail. Cho continued loudly, we can't be too hasty even if we want to return to the main body. Everything has to happen naturally. Chiao Mu did not fully understand. Cho's meaning was that she was probably only one step away from returning to her main body right now. However, when she looked inside herself, she had long discovered that her spiritual sense had already entered the 15th level. She was really only a little bit away from the divine sense state. However, it was this small distance that caused her to be trapped in the small ferret's broken body. Arbor frowned. He knew that this matter could not be rushed. For some people, even after 3 to 5 years of training their spiritual senses, they only manage to raise their spiritual senses by a small level. There were many such ordinary people in the world. It was well known that anyone who wanted to raise their spiritual sense by one level would often have to pay countless medicinal pills and painstaking efforts. For example, Arbor, a little level 8 soul master, had a level 15 soul sense. This was definitely out of the ordinary. Mo Lien chuckled as he reached out to touch her little ears. What do you want to eat, little dumpling? Arbor looked up at him and could not help but roll around in his arms, swallowing a wolf's howl. Chapter 24:16. What should she do? She really wanted to hug hubby, but this poor body. Miss Chow helplessly lowered her head to look at her small, furry body. So tiring, that especially since these two people had clearly seen through her identity. Duan Yu was even more hilarious. He held out several boxes of detoxification pills and had her identify which ones were most suitable for noble consort Duan. She couldn't get enough of that punk, so when she recalled the faint scent she smelled on noble consort Duan's body, she used her small claws to pick out several types of detoxification pills for noble consort Duan to take. The person who poisoned her was very low level. She reckoned that she would recover greatly after taking them for a few days and wouldn't suffer from any lingering illnesses in the future. Little furball, do you want to take a look at a talisman shop? Mo Lien, who was strolling around Pingshan town with the little fellow in her arms, stopped at the entrance of a very small talisman shop. The little fellow wanted to nod in high spirits, but when she saw her small claws, she lay down listlessly. She couldn't do anything with this appearance. It's fine, let's go in and play. Prince Mo walked into the talisman shop. Just as he stepped into the talisman shop, he came face to face with two young women. The person walking in front was dressed in a gorgeous maroon dress. Her chin was slightly raised, and she looked very domineering. The one following behind her was naturally her little maidservant. She followed step by step with a fawning expression and an exquisite box in her hand. She reckoned that the box contained some talisman papers. Rong Shanshan's eyes naturally brightened the moment she saw Mo Lien. However, when she thought of her identity, she still maintained her composure. She pretended to adjust her pace, and her originally swift steps slowed down considerably. When she brushed past the man, she even deliberately glanced at him from the corner of her eye. In the end, there was nothing. He didn't even look her in the eye. Oh, not to mention in the eye, he didn't even glance at her from the corner of his eye. Rong Shanshan watched as the corners of his lips curled up slightly. His brows were picturesque as he lowered his head. His gaze was as soft as water as he brushed past her. Rong Shanshan felt an inexplicable itch in her heart, as if a soft goose feather had brushed past her. She couldn't help it. The man in front of her was too good-looking. Even if he didn't do anything and just stood in front of others, he was still so handsome that people couldn't help but look at him. Noticing the change in Rong Shanshan, the maidservant hurriedly took a few steps forward. "Princess, should we stop him?" "No need." Rong Shanshan raised her chin proudly. "Find someone to check his identity later." Rong Shanshan left with her maidservant, but Mo Lian was completely unaware of this episode. He strolled around the talisman shop with the little fellow in his arms and bought some items that caught his eye, giving them all to his wife in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, his wife was not in a good mood and kept looking at him with resentment. Prince Mo reached out to stroke her little head with a grin. "Good girl, I'll take you to eat something delicious." The man and ferret left the talisman shop. Prince Mo carried his wifey to the entrance of a specialty noodle shop in Flat Mountain Town and walked inside. Duan Yu, who was sitting by the window, looked up and rolled his eyes at him. "What are you dawdling for? You took so long to come. I heard that the noodles here are the best within a radius of 800 kilometers. Duan Yu poured some vinegar into the small dish in front of Mo Lian and extended his hand to Prince Mo. "I'll feed her." Catch up on yesterday's chapter. Chapter 24:17. Bah, how could he leave the matter of feeding his wife to someone else? Mo Lian irritably rolled her eyes at him and placed the little fellow on the table. "No need. You know how to feed her. I'm telling you, she might be a ferret, but she's very particular about her meals. Mo Lian. You have to serve her before and after the meal, understand?" Duan Yu took advantage of Prince Mo's daze to irritably carry the little fellow in front of him and call out, "Waiter. Bring a basin of clear water." Although the waiter didn't know what this lord wanted to do, he still carried a basin of clear water over according to the customer's request. Duan Yu ordered that person to drag over another stool and place the basin on the stool. Then, he picked up the round little fellow and placed her paws down. As he rubbed them, he gently said, "Wash your hands and feet. Wash them clean. Don't make a fuss and don't splash the water out." Mo Lian, the royal guard standing next to his master like a pole, silently twitched his mouth. Right now, he practically didn't need to turn around to know that everyone in the main hall was looking at his master like he was an idiot. Yet this action was especially smooth and adept when performed by his handsome and otherworldly master. His movements were as smooth as flowing water and very eye-catching. Needless to say, all the young ladies and young wives at the tables by the window were staring straight at him. Mo Lian promptly walked over, hastily scrambling to carry his wife. What a joke! How could he let Duan Yu do something as simple as washing her feet? Although this wasn't his wife's body, her core was. Intolerable. "I'll do it myself." Mo Lian snatched over the little fellow who had just washed her two paws and irritably rolled her eyes at Duan Yu. Who doesn't know how to do such a simple thing? Arbor expressionlessly watched as Duan Yu carried her over and Mo Lian snatched her back. Her beady eyes looked at the two with slight disdain. The two of them must have thought that Jojo Sama's dazed look was amusing, and were trying to snatch her away like a little doll. Her body wasn't in a good condition now. Once she recovered, the two of them would be in for a good show. If the two of them knew what Jojo was thinking, they would definitely cry. This little ancestor, even if they had the guts as big as the sky, they would never treat her as a toy. Mo Lien sat up straight and felt that his wife was about to explode. He quickly comforted her and said, "Sweetheart, don't be angry. After we wash our hands and feet, I'll give you something delicious to eat." Duan glanced at Mo Lien and harumphed. He then turned around to order the waiter hiding on the side, "Give me 3 bowls of scrambled egg noodles. 2 more plates of dumplings, hurry up." She was in a bad mood. She felt that he was just sitting here looking for trouble. He was deliberately looking for excitement. Why did he feel uncomfortable when he saw Mo Lien? This noodle restaurant had been operating in Ping Shan Town for who knew how long. It was a well-known and long-established noodle restaurant. The waiters were all very diligent, and the prices weren't too expensive, so business was booming every day. Originally, everyone ate their own meals and lived in harmony every day. However, everyone's gazes kept involuntarily drifting to the 2 people and the marten by the window today. Some people even secretly covered their mouths and snickered. It was truly because those 2 people and the marten's actions were too strange. That marten was probably hunted down in the heavenly ice and snow domain. It looked rather cute in a small bowl. However, those actions and expressions made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 24:18. The strangest ones were the 2 men at the table by the window. Their looks were out of the ordinary, and their manners were elegant, as if they were 2 young masters from noble families. But in reality, they were actually 2 idiots with a mental illness. Everyone watched oddly as the 2 fought to finish washing little Martin's claws. The handsome young man in purple with long hair and tightly pursed lips actually took out an expensive handkerchief from his pocket and used it to wipe little Martin's claws. Mo Lien, she didn't expect Duan Yu to be so cunning. Mo Lien didn't have any handkerchief to wipe with her, so that guy beat her to it. There were a total of 4 tables by the window. Besides Mo Lien's table, the people at the other 3 tables were all looking at them oddly. The 2 young women at one of the tables were staring at Mo Lien and Duan Yu so hard that their eyes were about to pop out of the window. Arbor. As a marten, she felt that her recent mission was to eat, sleep, and eat until she was full. Other than that, she could only play as she pleased. When she saw a large bowl of noodles that looked rather chewy in front of her, she eagerly leaned over the bowl and stared at the noodles and eggs soaked in the broth. Mo Lien quickly carried her over and picked up the chopsticks to place the noodles on a small plate on the side for her. The diners who were secretly watching them in the main hall couldn't resist rolling their eyes. Where did this marten come from? Wasn't this behavior befitting an emperor? The little fellow squatted on the table and used a small claw to grab the cold noodles and put them into her mouth. Everyone, they had never seen a marten that could eat noodles. Slurp. And they had never seen a marten that could slurp noisily while eating noodles. Meanwhile, Mo Lien beamed at his wife, his heart brimming with pride and satisfaction. Look, his wife could attract attention even while eating noodles. She was definitely a true genius. If Duan Yu knew what he was thinking, he would definitely spit on his face. This shameless guy, blindly showing off. We will leave tomorrow, Mo Lien said dryly. Duan Yu's grip on his chopsticks tightened, and he looked up at him. Do you need to be in such a hurry? Mo Lien nodded. I came out on my own at the last minute. By now, I reckon that my father has already been alerted. Mo Lien didn't continue, but Duan Yu already understood. If the great emperor of the divine prefecture came all the way here and found out that his son was still in the Tsang province, it might cause some unnecessary conflict and trouble. Okay. Duan Yu replied aloofly, I'll come find you after a while. Mo Lien thought of the old man's birthday, which was just around the corner, and raised her eyebrows noncommittally. Miss Chiao had already finished the small plate of noodles in front of her. At this moment, she was hugging the plate and eating her dumplings. As soon as Crown Prince Mo saw her charmingly naive appearance, he was delighted. His wife was adorable no matter what she looked like. Duan Yu glanced at that man and harumphed. He casually picked up a dumpling and handed it to Miss Chiao. "Little dumpling, try my shiitake mushroom stuffed dumpling." Miss Chiao felt that her marten body was full. However, her small claw inexplicably reached over and hugged that dumpling. This marten was a glutton. Miss Chiao thought expressionlessly. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to only want to eat when someone fed her. Forget it, eating more could also nourish this weak marten's body, even though she felt a bit stuffed right now. Chapter 24:19. The little girl hugged the dumpling and took 2 bites. Just as she was about to take a 3rd bite, she suddenly heard a familiar voice calling Brother Ali. The little fellow's furry paw that was hugging the dumpling twitched slightly. As expected, she saw Duan Yu's face darken when she looked up. Prince Mo rejoiced in Duan Yu's misfortune and looked up at the girl who rushed in from the noodle shop's entrance. He winked at Duan Yu. That girl from last night came again. Prince Mo's mood soured when he thought of how the little girl's soul actually floated to the heavens of ice and snow to find Duan Yu. Anything that could sully Duan Yu's mood right now was especially good for him. Commandery Princess Xiangchang naturally wouldn't admit that she followed Prince Chen out the entire way. In fact, she had been waiting at the restaurant across the street for a long time before Duan Yu stepped into this noodle shop. She especially found a spot where she could see Brother Ali. She had been observing him from the moment he called over that waiter to bring a basin of clear water to fawn on a mink. She truly couldn't bear it anymore, so she rushed down from the restaurant across the street to find him. Ask her why she couldn't bear it anymore. Xiangchang couldn't resist cursing. From the beginning until now, Commandery Princess Xiangchang had been watching her brother Ali attentively attending to the mink. No matter how she looked at it, she felt that Brother Ali's gaze was a bit strange. How was this looking at a mink? It was clearly as if he was looking at his little lover. When Commandery Princess Xiangchang thought of the words, little lover, she shuddered in disgust and couldn't help but shudder. When she looked at the snow-white mink on the table again, her gaze was as if she was looking at a monster that could bring disaster to the country and its people. It was especially terrifying. Qiao Mu was baffled and lowered her head to look at her small paws. He didn't think that his tiny body could provoke this renowned Commandery Princess in any way. Commandery Princess Xiangchang had been treated coldly by Duan Yu several times in a row. Compared to this mink's treatment just now, it was definitely she, a dignified Commandery Princess, couldn't even compare to a mink. How could this not infuriate her? Without thinking, she reached out to grab Miss Chiao on the table. What are you doing? Duan Yu jumped in fright and quickly raised his chopsticks to block Commandery Princess Xiangchang's indiscreet hand. On the other side, Mo Lien's movements were also quick. In a flash, she picked up the little fellow who was squatting there and held her in her arms. She didn't care that her sleeves were stained with grease from her greasy claws. Arbor looked at Xiangchang Commandery Princess as if he was looking at an idiot. What's going on? Why did he hit her for no reason? Brother Ali, am I not even comparable to a mink in your heart? After being treated coldly for the past few days, Commandery Princess Xiangchang questioned Lin Mingya the moment she opened her mouth. She could not think of anything else. It's obvious. Duan Yu's reply inexplicably pricked his heart. The group of onlookers couldn't help but sympathize with the beautiful girl in front of them. This girl was really pitiful. Of all the people she could like, she had to like a crazy person. Now, she even asked such a question in front of everyone. In the end, she was slapped in the face by the man. It was so painful. Obvious. Duan Yu's answer immediately made Commandery Princess Xiangchang's face pale. Brother Ali's meaning was that it was obvious that she was not even comparable to a mink. How could Brother Ali say that? Commandery Princess Xiangchang felt like her heart was about to shatter. She turned to glare at that mink with increasingly unfriendly eyes. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.